Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move. This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode. This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan?
Hey guys, welcome back. And before we get started, like always, if you see something in this episode that resonates within you or you think that needs to be shared information, push it out. Don't be selfish with it. Today we got a special guest, one of my good buddies, somebody who's been a friend and a mentor to me for the last 10 years at least, or 7-8 years at least. Everything from school to garage talks to economic stock market, life in general, and finding purpose. Today I'm going to bring you Tommy Williams. Tommy Williams has had a litany of things that he's done, Dr. Tommy Williams. And I kind of followed in his path a little bit with college after I get out because I was reeling about what, purpose and this and that. And he'd helped me with that. And then we just kind of became good friends, both at the Wounded Warrior Battalion around the same time. And so we're going to have him on today and kind of pick his brain about different things across the world. Tommy, I know that we've been trying to do this for a minute, and appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So to get started, usually in the first couple of minutes, I like to ask a couple pointed questions. I'm writing another book, writing it on leadership. Where do you come from? Let's start there. And I want to know the family dynamic as far as siblings, parents, one parent, two parents in the house.
Yeah.
And then the culture in which you grew up.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess basically I grew up in Canada, right? I was born in a small place called Oxbow, Saskatchewan. That's the province in Canada. I don't even know how many people are there, maybe 2,000, something like that. Excuse me. But for the most part, my hometown, I'd probably call Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is the biggest city in the prairies, right? Province is huge, bigger than Texas, but, probably has maybe 1.5 million people in the whole province, right? I grew up pretty normal life, right? My parents, they ended up getting divorced after I was out of the house, but had both parents, got two sisters, both are younger than me. Played a lot of hockey, did a lot of sports when I was a kid, was in the Boy Scouts, did a lot of stuff. And when I say Boy Scouts, I mean Canadian Boy Scouts, where we were camping in nylon tents 12 months of the year, right? So we've been in negative 40 degrees Celsius in a nylon tent, freezing the old schnuts off as a kid, trying to figure out how to get a stove fired up so you can eat something that's not raw, right? Like pancakes. Not always the best, but, did stuff like that. So did a lot of outdoor stuff, a lot of fishing, didn't do much hunting, which is, pretty big up there too. For the most part, we'd stalk animals and things like that, but I never really had any gun time on them or, dressing and things like that. So, did all that, ended up graduating high school. And so it's kind of interesting, the economy at the time in Canada, where I grew up, it was right in the middle of the prairies. It's considered the West, but it's like how Texas is the West. Well, that's kind of the central part of the country, you know what I mean? So in Saskatchewan, it's the same, just north. And there's a lot of economic turmoil, I guess you could say. So a lot of people were leaving Saskatchewan. They were going to either coast. They were going to British Columbia, Alberta on the left side, or Manitoba and Ontario on the right side. And so we were kind of caught in there. And to kind of gauge how bad it was, you could buy a acre of land for $50 Canadian back in the 90s when I left, right? So pretty big deal. So we were there right after I graduated high school. I decided, I was going to take some, maybe go to college or whatnot, because my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, didn't want me joining the military. And then I went out to the West Coast, started going to college out there, and ended up joining the reserves. So I was in the Canadian military in a unit called C4th Highlanders of Canada, which is a Highland unit, right? So we wore kilts and stuff like that for our dress uniform. It was an infantry unit, which I ended up, again, things are different there.
Like fight-in kilts?
Well, so
like
here's the thing. So
the
dudes that were like my mentors, they, a couple of them, I guess it would be like the guys that were mentoring me, the guys above them, they were in Italy fighting in the mountains in kilts, and they're wool kilts, right? So like legit, like these dudes are hard as woodpecker lips. You know what I mean? Just crazy stuff coming out of them. So yeah, they absolutely used to.
So, but your dress uniforms were still kilts.
So our dress uniforms are still kilts. Like, things have changed since, everybody went to Marpat or some sort of digital camouflage. Back in the day, it was just olive drab is what we were wearing at the time, and black boots. And then with us, because it was a Highland unit, instead of wearing a beret, we wore a Balmoral, right, with your cat badge on it and stuff like that. So there's little differences there. But for the most part, our sister unit, I think, was the Black Watch out of the UK. And if you know the dudes that stand guard for the Queen and stuff like that, they wore the Busbies, the Grand Poobah hats, right? And so that's our sister unit over there. But anyway, did that for a couple of years. I think I probably had like maybe 2.5 years active time. I think 8 years on the books total. And then my girlfriend at the time, was in nursing school. And so what they were doing, and again, the economy, right? Like everybody talks about how good Canada is and stuff.
What was the issue with the economy?
So just some of it's economic downturn, but then other things, right? Like in the military there, we were kind of like put out to pasture, right? We didn't have a training budget. We didn't have, there wasn't a lot of stuff. So the only way you were like going to go do anything is if you got on UN missions at the time. And so we'd get spun up for that. And so, like, I was spun up to go into Bosnia Herzegovina, back in the day. That would have been like 93, 94, I think. And again, my brain's a little off some days, and that's so far in the past. I don't remember exactly. But we were spun up to go into that. But then the budget fell through for it. So the units that were training to go, they had money for training, but they didn't have money to ship them and do all this other stuff. So I caught wind of that and was like, let me go permanent personnel. That way I'm not doing all the bullshit training, what I mean? And ended up getting a gravy job and kind of hung out for a couple months just doing nothing really, making a paycheck, which was good. But the economy at the time, so just weird things, right? Like Canada. So my wife's a nurse. She was going through nursing school at the time. When people were graduating, what they would do is they would take you on part-time, right? And so the healthcare system there is pretty socialist. Like you can't just go and open up your own practice and charge cash. You have to use insurance. Like it's mandatory, right? So even now there's doctors even today are trying to open up cash practices there, and they're not allowed. They're getting shut down by the government. So back then, you'd graduate and then they'd be like, oh, well, we'll take you on part-time. So rather than hire like 2 full-time nurses, they'd hire like 6 part-time nurses. Right. So now think about that. You're coming out of school, you've got student loans, you're trying to raise a family or start a family and do all that stuff. And you can't. Hang on a second. Excuse me. And so you can't. So we were like, well, crap, what do you want to do? So we decided to come down to the States and just try it out. So we like loaded up a car.
And what year are we in?
This is 1996.
96.
96, right? So in 1996, so my wife, ends up graduating, writes her boards because, every state has a different board. So she wrote some generic ones, and we ended up driving down through, we came down through Montana, went through Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and then Texas. And we were putting out resumes and doing interviews the whole way down, right? And we weren't sure we came down just with no plan, no timeline, just, hey, get down to Texas, turn around. If somebody offers us a job, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so it came down to New Mexico and Texas, and we ended up getting, we decided on the one in Houston. So then we drove back to the States, loaded up a U-Haul, and 2-3 days later drove down to Texas. And when I say drove, I mean straight. So I had the smallest U-Haul you could get,
getting after it,
whatever it was, right? And I had a little car hauler, like the one that it only does the front axle dolly. Well, U-Haul, of course, they hooked me up the right way, right? And they gave me one that was broken. So I'm sitting there, I'm going, so I get all the extra insurance. I'm like, man, I hope it totals my car. Like I'm going to get a freebie. Like, it's going to rip my car right off thing. I ain't lying, dude. We drove, and I say straight. And it's like 4,400 kilometers. I never did the math on that for like 2,700 miles would be my guess, right? We drove it straight. And when I say straight, I mean not stopping for gas. And I think we stopped at Subway or some shit one time. And most of the time, I'm the one driving, right? And so I've got my wife and my daughter laid out in the back of the U-Haul, like the roll-up door. We put a mattress down, and they're like snoozing, and, every couple of hours I'd let them out. let them out. And, my wife would switch and stuff. And anyway, it was really funny. Well, with the car, one of the on the dolly, on the car dolly, one of the ramps, the bolts were loose. And so it started sagging, and it was sparking. And I mean sparking hard, right? So, like, I'm driving, and everybody's coming up beside me. It looked like something from, like, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, right? Like, you're going the wrong way. And they're like, your car is on fire, right? And I'm like, thanks, bro. Like,
appreciate it.
I know. I'm hoping it gets ripped off and I get a new car. Like, U-Haul's by, going to hook me up. So we're driving, and it's just the most funniest thing. Well, long story short, we get to Houston, and the ramp was no crap about a foot shorter than the other one. It had, like, ground it down about a foot, and it had no braces on the side because it had worn out. So I got to pull my car off the dolly, and I just totally, like, right-angled that ramp. And I'm like, oh, that's hilarious, right? Anyway, I turned it in, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, what do you want me to do, dude? You gave it to me like that. Like, should have had somebody with a wrench tighten that stuff up. So it's pretty funny. So anyway, we ended up getting down to Texas, and that was 96. And then I immediately, probably within about 3 months, I went down to the recruiter. I was trying to get into the Army, actually, because I had been in the Army. Uh-huh. And they told me, absolutely no way, son. Like, you are a foreign citizen, foreign service, get bent, right? And I'm like, all right. So then I was down there on a trade NAFTA visa, right? And so my wife...
Explain that.
So trade NAFTA, that was back in the day, that was... So from Canada, America, and Mexico,
yep.
If you specialized in something, in a trade, right? My wife was a nurse. You could get a no questions asked visa if it was like a hot fill for that job, check. Right? So they were so hurting for nurses in America. That's why we came down. And so I was on a trade dependent visa, meaning I couldn't work, right? So I had a TD visa. She had a trade NAFTA visa, so she's allowed to work, and we had to renew it every year, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're living in Texas. Well, we got to go to the border, leave, and come back in to renew it every year. So we drive down to Brownsville, Mexico. So funny story down there. We drive down there to renew it. You have to leave the country. So we're like not freaking out, but like, man, if they deny this or anything, right. We're stuck in Mexico. Like we're not even in Canada.
Yeah.
Right. So we had driven down there. So I had this grand plan, right? I'm like, okay, we live in Houston. I think it was 4.5 hours. I'm not positive on that.
It's about that.
Yeah. So I'm like 4.5 hours. Let's go. I'm like, we're getting up at 2 a.m. We're going to be there by 6. There's not going to be a line. No, nothing. Right. So we go flying down there, go into Mexico, immediately turn around, come back in. It takes about 30 minutes, I think, to go through the whole thing. Park in the thing. There's barely any cars in the parking lot, right? I'm like, yes. Walk up to the doors. I open the doors, and that's the back of the line. So it's like 100 people deep, and they're in there with their suitcases, all their worldly belongings, just trying to make it through, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like we're gonna have to get a hotel. Yeah. Or something. Like, maybe we'll see in the parking lot. I'm like freaking out because I did not see this coming at all, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm talking to my wife, and we had our daughter with her. I'm like, I don't know what anything about. And all of a sudden I hear this like, hey you. And I'm like, there's no way he's talking to me. And I like lean out across the line, and I see this dude going, yeah, you, like, come here. And I'm like, come here. I'm Canadian, dude. I don't skip the line. I'm still, I'm still brand new Canadian. Like, I'm apologizing to everybody as I'm like, sorry, walking out. I get up to the line, and the first thing I say to this guy is like, hey man, I can wait, just trying to do the polite thing. And he's like, and this is like eye-opening to me as a Canadian. He's like, listen, man, they were here yesterday, they were here the day before, they're going to be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day. They're like, he goes, you're new. It's not even that I'm new. It's that they don't have, like, it's like winning the lottery. They're trying to, make it into the country, but there's no reason for them to be there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But they don't have anything else to do in the daytime, right? They're not working. They're not doing this. They're hoping. Yeah. They're praying that they can make it up there and somebody will just cut them a break, right? And so that's what I'm getting at. So it's the same people in that line. He's probably processed them and denied everybody that's already in that line, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I get up there, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, we're Canadian. Oh, we don't get Canadians. So there's like 3 dudes just like stamping stuff, and they're like flying. Oh yeah, hey, signing this. Dude, I was in and out of there in like 10 minutes. Nice. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, this is America. Like turn around, and now I'm going to get mugged on the way out of there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all of them are looking at you.
Yeah, they're all looking at, oh, it's because he's white. It's no, dude, that has nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? But,
yeah.
I'm just giggling. So we hop in the car and go. But yeah, that was like 19. That would have been probably 98, I think, was when we went to renew that. So pretty funny story. But
So, okay, so you come back from that. How do you get in the Marine Corps?
so another great story, right? So we came down in 96, tried to join right out the get-go, couldn't do it, was on a trade dependent visa, right? So I can't work.
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm a stay-at-home dad at that point, which was literally driving me nuts. It was my mid-20s. I think it was 23, 24 at the time. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I need to do something. This is ridiculous. My wife's the breadwinner. Like, we can't have this.
Not the traditional family.
No, yeah, right. And so, I'm super frustrated. Anyway, so what I did to pass the time was I got really big. I was big into the martial arts before I came down to America, but that's what I was doing in Canada. So I came down.
That's kind of something we glossed over there.
Yeah,
because you taught that in the Canadian military, right?
Not in the Canadian military, no.
Oh,
so
okay.
I ran pretty much while I was in Canada. I was like the number 2 guy at one or two different dojos. But anyway, we moved down to America, and I started training with that's why one of the reasons why we chose Houston over New Mexico is because we knew for a fact the art that I trained in that there was some legit dudes there.
What was
right? It was Bujinkan is what they call it, right? Budo Taijutsu. So it's a Japanese system. We'll get into that in a second. But anyway, so while we're in Houston, I'm teaching martial arts, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm not making any money at it. I'm just helping out, doing this, doing that, right? And one of the dudes was a student of one of my other buddies, and so we were always like grouped together, right? Like I would go guest instruct at my buddy's dojo, he'd come over to mine. So regardless of who the students are, we're all kind of like a group, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this dude was a Marine, and he was a recon Marine, right? And so this is after 9/11 now. And he had gotten a BCD out. He got, I can't even remember the dude's name, but he got BCD'd out of the Marine Corps, and it was for like a drinking problem at the time, right? And I think he'd been in for 6 years. They BCD'd him, then they recalled him. They recalled him after 9/11, and he's like, oh, you want me to come back? Like, okay, go ahead. We're going to get rid of that BCD. Like, he had all these conditions, right? You're going to do that. You're going to reimburse me. So he ended up having he had torsion on his testicle. Right, so while he was in the Marine Corps, imagine this, right, going to the doc, and you're like, man, I'm hurting, like, what the crap, oh, change your socks, Motrin, hydrate, whatever. And so now he's like in so much pain all the time, he starts hitting the bottle.
Yeah.
Right, starts hitting the bottle, develops a drinking problem, gets kicked out of it because of his drinking problem, but the real concern is whatever is going on with him medically. So he gets out. After getting out, he's out for like a week or two, goes to the hospital. They're like, oh, you got a torsion testicle. We'll take care of that. Take care of it. And now he's got a big smile on his face and quits drinking. Do you know what I mean? Like, just a big old kick in the nuts from the Marine Corps again. But anyway, so he had all these conditions. Like, you need to do this and you do that. And I'm like, man, that's great. And he's like, bro, if you want to get in the military, like, you better head on down to MEPS because now's your time. And no shit. I was like, really? Yeah, all right, I'll check it. I'll look into that. Next day I went down to MEPS. 25 days later, I was at boot camp. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, oh, yeah, hell yeah.
Blue ice, baby, we can use you.
Yeah. So,
wait, your visa didn't...
I was on a green card at the time. I joined the Marine Corps on a green card.
No, I mean, I thought you had a no.
So I had a trade. I was on a visa, trade NAFTA, trade dependent visa back in '96 when we first got here. That probably took like 3 or 4 years, and we got green cards.
Okay.
So once we had the green cards,
then you're good.
I was good, right?
And then what? And then there's a nationalization process through the Marine Corps, right? Or no?
So yeah, Bush hooked that up. We can get into that in a second. But anyway, so I joined the Marine Corps. Mind you, I'm now 29 years old.
Yeah.
Right. I turned 30 at boot camp. So I'm 29 years old. I'm going in there. I'm like, I got this. I've already done this once, right? And for the most part, the Canadian boot camp and the American boot camp or Marine Corps boot camp, they were very similar in some ways, and other ways, absolutely not. And I will tell you this. Canadian military, they treat you like an adult, right? So like the first couple weeks, you're playing some fuck games like everybody does, right? But after a certain point, they just give you what your taskers are, and they expect you to be a man or a woman and get through that, right? So, hey, these are the uniforms you're wearing for tomorrow. Make sure they're ready. We're going to the range. Make sure your gun's good. Like, they give you a little bit of responsibility. Not so much in the Marine Corps, right? Everything's spoon-fed, ABCs, whatever. And you have that direct handler on there. So that was a real issue for me when I joined the Marine Corps. And mind you, I wasn't a poolee, right? So I didn't know you had to talk in the third person. You know what I mean? So prime example, we get picked up in forming. I don't know you're not allowed to talk in the chow hall. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sitting there mowing down like, hey fellas, where y'all from? You know, and they're like, don't make eye contact with me. Like they're shoving me off. Like, what the fuck? Like weak ass bitches. You know, like I didn't know what was going on. But funny story, the dude that picked me up in forming turned out to be a first sergeant for a unit I supported later on. We can get into that. But
okay.
So anyway, I'm in forming. We get picked up. I'm literally like in the chow hall just mowing down whatever I want. I'm like chugging water, like I'm on my own schedule to go to the bathroom. You know, I'm like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. Like, okay. And people don't realize like some of the things you got to do in the Marine Corps, right? So that first night we got picked up, we're standing there and, you know, everybody's all now, you know, everybody's getting yelled at and get in line, run, hurry, you know, all this stuff, just trying to get the anxiety up in the room. So we're standing there, and they're showing us how to make our racks, right? The first night we get there. So they're like sheet and blankets and all this crap. You know, we get the scurvy blankets from the Indians, you know what I mean? Yeah, the ones that are like smallpox blankets.
Smallpox blankets, yeah.
That have never been washed, you know. So we're sitting there, but we're all standing there in flip-flops and our tighty-whities. That's it. No shirts, no pants, no nothing. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, I got to go to the bathroom. Like, this is not good, right? So I'm like, I don't even know the protocol for this. So I put my hand up, right? And my senior drill instructor like looks at me. I was like, the fuck is this dude want?
And you're probably older than him, right?
I was probably, yeah, I probably was older than him.
Probably a couple of years older than him.
So there was one drill instructor the same age as me. Everybody else was like 2 to 3 to 4 years younger. And it wasn't actually my senior. It was this other dude. So he's like, looks at me. He's like, yeah, what do you want? I'm like, I need to use a bathroom, please. Just like that, right? Like, I need to use the bathroom, please. And he looks at me like I got a dick growing on my forehead, right? And I'm like, so he's like, just continues on with his conversation, right? And he's like, try again. And I'm like, so I'm thinking about it. I'm like looking around, and everybody doesn't want to make eye contact with me, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, maybe I got to do the sir sandwich. So I put my hand back up, and he's like, what is it? I'm like, sir, I need to use the bathroom, please, sir. And he's like, fuck no. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, all right, motherfucker, I got you. So I'm sitting there, let her go about 2 more minutes, and I put my hand up, and he's like, what do you want? And I'm like, if you don't let me go to the bathroom, I'm going to piss all over myself right here. And he's like, just makes eye contact with me, and he's like, well, and I'm like,
Roger that.
So everybody just starts backing away from me like I've got the cooties, you know what I mean? And I'm pissing all over everywhere. Just making
You want to play games?
Straight eye contact, right? Like, oh, this ain't my fucking first rodeo. Like, I got this. So I piss everywhere. I got this puddle. And so, you know, you like finish up. I'm not like touching my dick or anything. So I'm just kind of standing there. And then you get that little twitch, like you're maybe mentally just shaking it, you know what I mean? And so I'm looking at him, making eye contact the whole time. And he's just astonished, right? And he's like, and I'm like, just looking at him, like waiting for him to make me do some push-ups or, gee whiz, push-ups, you know. And he's like, well, go get the mop and bucket. And I'm like, all right. So I go home, fucking, like, what? I got this. You know, like, if this is, anyway, long story short, what's funny about that is we literally kind of set the precedent, I feel like, right? Maybe not in a good way, maybe not in a bad way, but I'm talking like, you know, the last 2 weeks at your boot camp, you're pretty much doing drill. Mm-hmm. We're drilling in our Charlies, and this is with 2 weeks left. During the whole time, we'd be sitting there, and they'd be like, hey, who needs to go to the bathroom? And like 3 or 4 dudes would put up their hand, and they'd be like, oh, we don't got time for the bathroom. And then they'd all have a shit-eating grin on their face, and a drill instructor would have to take them wherever we're at back to the house to change because they were all like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to piss myself. Like, what's the big deal? I'm just going to pee myself. Well, the last 2 weeks of boot camp, we had the company commander had to come down and get on our drill instructors because we had dudes in Charlies shitting themselves on the drill field. Now imagine what a pain in the ass that is, because now you got to go to dry cleaning. You got to, you see what I'm saying? Yeah, like, so these drill instructors are getting mad.
Like, oh yeah,
you started the game.
Yeah,
you started the game. We're just playing it, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, anyway, it's really funny to me to just see that. Like, I always had a big little grin on my face for that. But anyway, so I joined there, turned 30. I was a West Coast Marine, so going up the Reaper, I'll never forget it. I turned 30 going up the Reaper, and there's a major, I don't even know who he was to me at the time, but we were having a little chat, as much as you can chat with somebody, right? While you're a recruit, right?
Yeah.
And he heard that I turned 30, and he goes, holy crap, dude. Like, so we had a little convo and stuff like that. But then that was it. So pretty funny story. I joined open contract. I was in the infantry in Canada. I tried to do that again. They told me there wasn't anything available. At least that's what my recruiter told me, right? And you got to remember, my recruiter's the same age as I am, and I hadn't signed on the dotted line yet, so I'm like not being the nicest person to them, right? Like, you're not gonna treat me like a fucking recruit, bro. And so we get into some stuff. Well, long story short, went in open contract, told me he'd hook me up with infantry as soon as something comes out. I get my orders. I'm supposed to be a diesel mechanic, so now I'm like, what the crap? Kind of settled with that, whatever. But what's funny is there was 3 Williams when I went to MCT, right? 3 Williams. They screwed up our orders. So I was supposed to be a mechanic. One was supposed to be a radio operator. One was supposed to be a motor T operator. And they screwed up the orders. And I don't mean the orders, I mean the plane tickets, right? So I was flying to 29 Palms. Somebody else was coming to Lejeune, whatever. And they were actually, this is how the Marine Corps is just screwed up, right? In some regards. Is that logistically it was going to be easier for them to change my orders than it was to be able to change my plane ticket.
Yeah.
And I'm like, absolutely not, bro. Like, so my drill instructor's just trying, well, don't worry about it, dude. You're just going to be a radio operator. I'm like, no, like, I don't want to be a mechanic either, but I'd already settled on that.
I definitely don't want to do radios.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would have been fine doing it. But what I'm getting at is you don't give it to me in writing and then rescind that and tell me just to suck it up. Like, I knew that from the Canadian military. You know what I'm saying? And so I was like, man, this is garbage. So I had to go. I went and talked to some people, and then I was kind of livid. Like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, and I'd already kind of made a name for myself at another point, because when I first checked into MCT, I went over and told them that I was supposed to be there for ITB, and they're like, what are you talking about, dude? You've got. I'm like, no, fam, like, check this out. Like, my recruiter straight lied to me. And I'm like, just talking just like that, because it's true, right? So I'm speaking the truth. So you have some Marines that are like, yeah, dude, you're totally getting screwed. Like, hang on. And they're trying to, like, the dudes that look after dudes, they're trying to take care of you. And so they gave me the option. They're like, look, man, we can't get you into this class, but if you want to stay here and stay for, like, it was like 3 to 6 weeks till the next class formed up, we'll put you in form, and you can go, like, paint shit on base or whatever they have the recruits
Guards
waiting, guards, right? Do that, or you can go. And I'm like, you know what, because I had a family at the time. I'm like, I gotta go. So then ended up doing MCT, ended up going to the fleet, graduated top of my class as a motor T-Mech. In fact, I never got one question wrong on any test, but I graduated with a 99.96% average as a mechanic. But I never got one wrong, ever. So riddle me that. Like, there's got to be something in the matrix that they have, because it's all digital, right? So I was supposed to get choice of my orders. I had a family. They were still living in Houston. I was going to pick, East Coast, West Coast, whatever. The guy that was in charge of my platoon, the staff sergeant, was just a spineless piece. And my whole class got sent to Okinawa, including me, who was top grad.
Without.
So I get meritorious promoted, right, to Lance Coconut. And then I get pushed out there.
Now, what rank did you get out of the Canadian Army?
Ooh, that's a good question, bro. So I hadn't even graduated boot camp, and I was already slotted for a court martial, which is we can get into that story if you want. But I ended up being so it would have been like a E4 is what I would have got out as. Gotcha. E4. So nothing in. So here we go. We'll spill the beans on this one. So in Canada. I ended up joining back in whatever year it was. I went to boot camp, and it was, we had a barracks. They were kind of like H huts, right? So you had a couple wings on them. There was a DI hallway, whatever. The drill instructors had their own billeting, so they had a duty guy that would come sometimes and stay overnight, but for the most part, we were on our own. So they would literally turn the breaker off, turn the power off, and we were left to our own design till morning, right? So you're sitting in there ironing, cleaning your room, doing whatever you got to do. And we didn't live in a squad bay. They were 4-man rooms, right? Double bunks. And we kept our weapons in there with us, right? So we had them locked and all that crap, but you get all that. And so anyway, we, in the Canadian military, once you get it's the base, I'm going to confuse all this, but it's like the base commander's inspection. And if you pass the base commander's inspection at boot camp, you get the weekend off. And the weekend off entails you, like, imagine being on Lejeune or New River, right? You get the weekend off. Well, now you can go to the PX. You can get some pizza. You can go get some beers. You can do whatever you want, right? So it's a big deal. So we ended up passing the inspection, or most of us did, I think. And so we got the weekend off. Well, my roommate at the time, this is a couple weeks before that, every night you have a different course senior, right? And maybe not every night, but they'll change it every couple of days. Somebody's always getting fired, right? Just like the course senior for the Marine Corps. And we had this little scrawny dude, can't remember his name, but he thought he was that guy, you know what I mean? Like, probably showed up to boot camp with combat boots on and all tacked out, you know, like just gung-ho, right? Which isn't bad in itself, but he's a bit of a bitch, right? A little bit of a buddy fucker. And my roommate, I hear him grunting and groaning one night, right? Now imagine, we don't have any drill instructors there. So I look over at this dude, and he was like maybe like Canada, there's not like a lot of different ethnicities, I should, you know, for the most part, but he was mixed. He was like half white, half black. So he had like olive drab skin, but he's like covered in sweat, and he's holding his stomach, and he can't even talk. Like, there's something wrong with him, right? And so I'm like, oh crap. So I'm like, all right. So I run and get this guy that's supposed to be in charge of us, right? Now, there's no drill instructors around. There's no duty phone or anything. You have a pay phone that you can call the duty with. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I run over here, and this dude's sleeping, and I wake him up. I'm like, hey, bro, you need to get a hold of the drill instructors. I'm calling 911. And so we called 911 and had this guy, and this is the base is called Shiloh, Canadian Forces Base, CFB Shiloh, which is out in the middle of nowhere, right? I mean, it's bigger. It's probably 4 times the size of Lejeune landmass-wise, and there's just barely any buildings there or anything like that. So they come. We had the duty, who's basically like a bunch of MPs, show up, and they're like, take him in their car to the hospital, and they CASEVAC. They put him on a bird and flew him to Winnipeg, right? Because he had a knot in his bowels, and it was like bursting. So I mean, pretty big deal. Like, absolutely life-threatening, all this stuff. Well, this clown didn't wake up, didn't go wake up the drill instructor or anything. So we get up the next morning, and we're like one down. Like, it's almost like this dude's UA, right? So I'm sitting there, and I'm like,
tell him ever.
He didn't wake up and go tell him. And so the drill instructor, questions him about it, and he's like, the dude threw me under the bus. He's like, no, Williams didn't come and wake me up, but all his roommates had heard it. You know what I mean? I'm like, what a clown. And mind you, when I went to Canadian boot camp, I was like, I'd been on my own for a year or two doing construction. And most of these dudes were straight off mama's tit, you know, they were fresh. So, you know, just this like man stuff, right? Like, dude, you're not going to like throw me under the, like, that's some belligerent shit. Like, that's my name that you're muddling up right now. Right?
Yeah.
So I had words with him about that. Well, long story short, my drill instructors came up to me after, and they're like, oh yeah, like, dude totally threw you under the bus, bro. Like, that's garbage. Like, you need to handle that, do this, do that. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever, I'll let it ride for a little bit. And so, they ended up making me the course senior for a bit, right? Well, I was full a little bit of piss and vinegar, a little bit, I guess you could say. And I didn't really tolerate the young dudes. Like, I'm not your mom and I'm not your dad. Like, get your shit done, bro. Like, I'm not here to
baby step you through this. Get it done or don't get it done. I don't care, but there's going to be repercussions if you don't, you know? And so anyway, they cornered me in a whiskey locker. There's 3 of them, and I'll never forget it because, you know, I was pretty big into martial arts at the time. And I had 3 dudes corner me in the whiskey locker. So 2 of them are standing in there. I walk in. This dude shuts the door behind him. And I started laughing, right? Like, so he's behind me, so I can't get out. So I turn around and I go behind him and I lock the door. Like, okay, clown, you want to play this? You'll be stuck in here with me?
Long story short, I put 2 of them down. The 3rd dude went running out of the room, right? And so now everybody's like, oh, crap, don't mess with Williams. You know what I mean? And the funniest part of this whole thing is, the night before I went to boot camp, I had a couple buddies of mine take me out and get me hammered drunk. And so we didn't fly or anything. You get put on a bus, and then you bus to boot camp, right? So we go down to this. It was right outside of University of British Columbia, UBC. There's a walkway you can go down, and they have this nude beach. That's like a nude sandbar, but everybody out there is like drinking or smoking weed, or, you know, they're Canadian. They do whatever they want out there. So they're like, yeah, we'll go down here and do this. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I'm sitting down there boozing. And I go to take a leak, and there's no bathrooms down there or whatever, so you kind of go off to the side and pee in the reeds. Well, I'm walking back, and I hear this like like, stay away from my girlfriend or something. Like, I don't even remember what it was. And this dude, and I just remember turning, and as I'm turning, there's like an 8-foot log swinging at my head, right? So I barely got my shoulder up, and it bounced off my shoulder, hit me in the head, and like KO'd me. So I wake up, and I got this dude sitting on my chest, just pummeling the crap out of my face. Another guy boot kicking me in the ribs, right? So I gain my composure. I throw this dude off me. I stand up, and I'm like, I'm gonna hurt you, bro. I'm done. And so they both go running down the beach. Well, I go back over the fire where my buddies are at, and they're like, oh my God, bro, like, your face is hamburger meat. So they take me up to the top of the stairs, and it's a couple hundred stairs. It's really, up on the side of a kind of a cliff. Mm-hmm. We get up there, and I just sit on the curb, and we flag down a cop. This is the day before I go to boot camp. So we flag down a cop, right? He drives me to the emergency room that's on campus there. And they start doing like x-rays and CT scan on my face. Now, mind you, I'm kind of hammered drunk. I look like I've been beat up. I smell like smoke, because my clothes are, I've been down there or whatever. They tell me that nothing's broken or anything, but I can't even see out my one eye because it's so shut. So I show up to the bus, and I go to get on the bus, and I hand him my ID, and this dude looks at me like I'm a homeless dude. And my hair, right? I used to have kind of longish hair, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of cutting it at boot camp. So I've been working with my brother-in-law on a fish boat. I'm like, bro, give me them dog clippers. And I just like straight shagged all my hair off. So it was like coming in kind of patchy. You know what I mean? So I straight up look like, I don't want to say a homeless dude because, I had pretty nasty hair, but everything else was fine. So I've got this big old shiner. My face is all busted up. I've got a funny haircut. I smell like smoke, and I'm hungover. And I'm like, here's my orders. And I'm waiting for him to go get the crap off my bus, Anyway, 8-hour drive. I get to where I'm going. Everybody piles off the bus. And so there, it's funny. Like, you get all your gear from your unit because every reserve unit has different stuff, right? So I had all my stuff issued to me, and the guy that gave me my orders told me to show up in civilian attire. So I'm the only guy there, beat the crap up in civilian attire. Looks like I'm trying to just get a free ride on a bus.
Peace in real quick.
And everybody else is in camis, right? And I walk in there, and everybody else just does not want to make eye contact, which is funny as crap, right? I've always found it funny that you get beat up. Like, I got the shit beat out of me. I looked bad, but everybody's looking at you like, don't mess with that guy. Why not? He's a pussy. Like, he got beat up. You know what I mean? Like,
somebody clearly handled him.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. But everybody's like, oh, don't mess with that guy. Like, obviously he fights, Yeah, but maybe not very well.
Yeah, didn't appear to be well.
So anyway, we get to boot camp. I'm waiting for him to kick me out. They they're all giggling. The story makes it around. Anyway, they called me Speed Bag was my nickname going through Canadian boot camp, right? Private Speed Bag. And so anyway, what's funny is we get onto a range one night. We're doing a night shoot, and we got some time to kill. So my drill instructors are up there like throwing each other around and doing this because they were into some martial art. And then my OIC, who was a female at the time, goes, "Hey, I think Williams knows martial arts," because like a dumbass, I'd put it on my bio sheet, right? And so I'm like, oh crap. So they're all like, yeah, right, like Speed Bag, whatever. So I get up there, and we're just doing a bunch of what ifs, and I start tossing these dudes around, and they were like, oh my God, bro, like, how'd you get beat up? And I'm like, well, that's a different story. You know what I mean? Like, hammered drunk,
Log to the face.
8-foot club over the back of the dome. Anyway, so it was pretty interesting to play into that. So long story short, the guy that buddy screwed me over, right? We end up going out. We end up drinking. Well, we tell this dude, like, you're blackballed, bro. Like, you're irresponsible. Don't hang out with us. Well, he goes and starts whining to some other dudes that were in the bar. So I go into the bathroom at this bar, and I get cornered by a couple dudes, and they're like, stop picking on this dude or whatever. And I'm looking at them like, shut your mouths. Like, you don't know the story. Like, just leave it, whatever, right? So it kind of infuriated me. Well, we get back to the barracks, and I'll never forget, I'm wearing flip-flops, shorts, and it was cold. So I had like one of the blankets over my shoulders, and I go and I'm like getting something out of the soda mess or something. And this dude comes over, and he's hammered drunk, little guy, and starts mouthing me off. And I'm like, son, you better just watch what you're doing here, right? And he takes a swing at me, bro. So I put this dude down. I'm drinking a Mountain Dew. I didn't want to spill my Mountain Dew. So I'm literally like, knock this dude down. I give him a couple flip-flop stomps to the dome, and it's on tile floor, right? And so now I've like the screws flipped, right? I'm like, oh, screw this. Like, I'm already going to get in trouble. So I took it upon myself, to go and recalibrate like 2 more dudes that were kind of shitbags in my platoon. And
like, if I'm gonna get it once, let's just get them all.
Right, and it wasn't really me throwing punches and stuff, but it was like Lord of the Rings shit, or Lord of the Flies, I should say. Lord of the Flies, right? Like, the one thing happens, and then all of a sudden we've got like pitchforks.
Chaos.
It was chaos, and everybody's hammered drunk, right? And so one of the dudes who ended up being my roommate, he was actually from Iraq, right? He was an Iraqi citizen that moved to Canada. Irrelevant, right? But he took it upon himself, like, you know, just a difference in culture, really. So, you know, we're getting like mass punishment because of him, and he thinks it's funny. Do you know what I mean? So it didn't play well with some people. And he just didn't see that, right? He didn't understand that. So anyway, somebody took a couple shots at him. Well, he ended up going to like PMO, like, you know, the MPs, and said it was a racial thing. So now it's like Red Star Cluster, right?
Yeah.
So we're sitting there. The next morning, we had Germans on base, because it's a pretty big base, but it's where all the Germans come for their tankers. They send all, you know, everybody that's conscripted in Germany, they send all the tankers there. They're in Canada for a couple months because we have such a vast training area and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we have everything that goes on with Germans, right? So we got the German MPs. We got, you know, they're driving around in these big Volkswagen buses. Mm-hmm. They're all like 6'5", you know, 2 bill, 250, probably big Germans. You know what I'm saying? That's who the cops are there. And so they didn't have enough cops to come and arrest me and the 2 other guys because they thought we were like dangerous. We're recruits, bro. Like, what are you talking about? So I'll never forget. I get arrested. I get thrown in, you know, basically jail. It's not really the brig. The jail, and I'm standing by trying to wait. So then we end up going through this whole court-martial shit. But I guess the key piece of the story I forgot to tell you is while we're drinking that weekend, I run into my drill instructors in the bar. And my drill instructor, my senior drill instructor, is basically like, Williams, like, this platoon is a shit show. Like, I'm expecting you to handle some business. And if you don't, there's going to be hell to pay. So that's what he basically tells me, right?
Yeah.
So me being the dude I am, right, I go handle business. Well, now I'm getting skylined. And then the only thing that saved me is I had a captain that was representing me, and he caught that my senior drill instructor, who is a warrant officer, so like the equivalent of a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, really, E6. Uh-huh. He caught him because it was it's all paper, SRBs and stuff like that. Yeah. He caught him back filling a bunch of shit because I was like,
against you.
Against me. So like I was the guy, you know, I was motivated, I was in shape, I was doing all this, and so everything was, you know, stellar, you know what I mean?
And he was going back
in there making, oh yeah, we had an incident and blah blah blah, and it was all fake. Like he was just trying to cover his tracks. And so I was keeping my mouth shut. I wasn't going to do anything, and then he brought me the evidence of that, and I was like, oh really? So then I was like, no, he absolutely, you know, and so we had it sorted out. So anyway, I ended up getting a 30-day sentence in the brig, right? And in Canada, we call it Club Ed. It's a military prison. It's like Leavenworth. But if you go in there, you come out a changed man, and not for the better. You know what I mean? So I was like, so they give me my sentence for like 30 days, and I'm like, oh my God, like my military career is over. It's not even started yet. You know, this. And then they come back at me, and they're like, but we're putting a stay on it, right? So basically like, hey, this is pending. Just make sure
if you fuck up,
you're on probation, basically, right? Don't screw anything up. So now I'm thinking, like, I get back to my unit, like, I want to just get out, because if I show up and I don't have a shave, can I end up in jail? Like, now it's a big deal to me, right? And so I got to my unit and I'm freaking out.
And this is the Highland unit?
Yeah, the Highland unit. So here's the thing, right? So they don't know anybody, you know, it's reservists. So, you know, it's kind of piecemeal. Well, I get there and I'm trying to stay off the radar and stuff, and we go to the range and we're doing like rifle qual for the infantry and stuff like that, and I'm sitting there and I'm just sitting there off to the side, like just minding my P's and Q's, and the dude that was in charge of the admin office was a Navy cat. He was a PO, petty officer, I don't even remember his name, but he's like, this is before computers, right? So everything that they were getting, like, hey, little Williams ain't coming back to the unit, he's getting a court martial, you know, so they're getting it all on the fax machine. And so they're like standing around the fax every day trying to get an update on what the crap is going on with this new guy that just joined. And they don't know who I am. Mm-hmm. They do, but they don't. You know what I mean? And so I'm up there on this range. I'll never forget it the first time I show up to the unit after. And they're just telling like Paul Bunyan stories about this recruit Williams. You know what I mean? And I'm like just sitting there going like, holy fuck. Like, should I say something? You know, like you guys are way, way off base. And so they're just talking, and they're not talking shit. They're just like, the stories it's like fishing stories. They're just getting more and more egregious, and I'm just sitting there, And then I kind of smirked or did like a little guffaw or something. And then one of the dudes like looks at me and he's like, hang on a sec, I don't know that dude. Like, hey man, what's your name? I'm like,
Little Williams.
fucking Private Williams. And they were just like crickets, right? And anyway, so it was really, really funny. But after that, everything kind of worked out. So I went and talked to the XO of the unit, and he's like read between the lines of what really went on. He goes, man, just watch your P's and Q's here. You'll be fine.
We're not trying to fuck you.
We're not trying to fuck you.
Yeah.
And so once I talked to him, like, he really squared me away. And after that, we were totally good. So, but that was pretty, I mean, that was the beginning of my military career, right? Like, show up, beat up, right?
Wild.
Yeah, just funny stuff. That was Canada. So I can't remember what we were talking about before that, but
No,
Well, he wanted to know why rank from.
oh yeah. So it was like E4 was the big deal.
But then
And
they didn't give you any reciprocity to the
So,
Marine Corps or anything like
well,
that?
funny thing about that is I wasn't I don't want to say I wasn't honest with my recruiter. I was able to get to boot camp in 25 days because he kept my Canadian record off the books, right? Whether he meant to or not, I don't know. But like when I showed up and in the Marine Corps, there was nothing in there. But, however, it doesn't matter. Like, they could have gave me reciprocity. I would have had those years added to my retirement, like all that crap. But it's kind of irrelevant. It's another NATO country, right? Like, nobody gives a crap about benefits.
Right.
But it would have absolutely benefited me. But it didn't matter because I'd already maxed out. Like, I got contract PFC because of college, and then when I graduated MLS school, they gave me a meritorious promotion for graduate.
you
top
moved
class.
up fast anyway.
Bro, it took me, like, from the day I went to boot camp to the day I picked up sergeant, it was 26 months.
Yeah.
But that's by design because
Yeah.
I came in at third. I wasn't playing the game. Like, what do I need to do to get promoted? And the reason why is because, like, my first duty station, I went to Okinawa, and I had a 20-year-old sergeant that was in charge of me, and I was a 30-year-old corporal. Not that that matters. But I started hitting the booze a little bit more than I probably should have, right? So, I mean, if you've never been to Okinawa, that's what you do there. You go to the gym and you drink. And I mean, it's if you're single. And I tried to get my family there, it wasn't happening. So anyway, what I'm getting at is there was an incident, nothing major, nothing bad. There was 2 or 3 Williamses in my platoon, and you had to log into the logbook. Well, somehow it got mixed, right? So it looked like I hadn't checked in. So I'm like almost passed out in my rack, and I have the duty, he was a staff sergeant, come rolling through into my room, and he starts getting like, he was like pinching my toes. I'm like laying in my rack, so he's like pinching my toes. I'm like, fuck off, dude. I didn't know who he was. I'm hammered. Like, get off. What are you doing, dude? Like, stop fucking touching me, queer bag or whatever, like just being derogatory towards him. And then he tells me he's like, duty. I'm like, then why are you touching me?
What's the issue?
What's the issue? And then he starts going off because the other Williams was underage, right? And I look old now, but I didn't back then. So he's looking at me, I'm at the age of 30, thinking I'm some 20-year-old kid, which now I'm like, maybe you should know your Marines a little bit better, bro.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, kind of light this dude up. So that was the only incident. Well, then, long story short, they want to, give me a counseling or whatever. So I've got a 20-year-old dude who's counseling me on drinking, and I'm looking at him like, get the fuck out of my face, bro.
Yeah.
I'm not taking this from you. Like, go get somebody else.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I'm in charge of you. I'm like, no, you're a sergeant in the Marine Corps, but you definitely ain't in charge of me. You know what I mean? Like, we're not playing this game. You're not going to counsel me on family. You're not going to counsel me on anything that you don't have.
Yeah, you don't have it.
You know what I mean? You don't know what it's like. Well, yeah, I do, because, so you're telling me that you break the rules because you're drinking underage, bro? Is that what you're telling me right now? Like, you can't, there's no way to win that situation. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway.
Sound like he's just kind of being a real dick anyway.
It's not even that he was being a dick. It's that he didn't understand. He wasn't mature enough. Like, imagine being, like, you're brought up and the only thing you see is what people before you teach you, right? And so you don't have the wherewithal or the experience to be able to look outside of the box and be like, well, hey, this is the way I've been going, but hey, let me go talk to this guy over here because maybe he's got some experience with this, right? And then that's how you approach that. Because you don't need to tell me, like, I know what you're going through. No, you don't, dude. You can't even drink. You know what I mean? So little things like that, and you're like, why is this guy even talking to me right now?
No, I get that.
Yeah, so that's where we're at with that. But
aside from that, you move up pretty quick in the Marine Corps.
yeah, I mean, I probably would have moved up quicker as a mechanic than I did in EOD because EOD, like, there's a lot of really, really good dudes there. I have a lot of respect for a lot of the guys. But then you also have the lazy ones, right?
No, so you do a whole tour as a mech first, though, right?
I did 4 years, yeah.
Then, so how's the decision come to transfer to EOD? Because it's not like you can just say, hey, I want to be EOD, right?
No, well, I mean, you kind of, it's a lat
there's
move.
a process.
It's a lat move. There's a process. So what I was looking at, to be honest, was I knew I didn't want to stay in and be a mechanic. I'd done it on a MU, and we were like, I never worked. It's not that I do like to work, right? But we worked, but there was never any appreciation there, which I don't mind. That, like, I don't, just give me a thank you. You know, I don't need anything, any awards or any crap like that. Just hey, good job, and give me a day off every once in a while, because we worked a lot, you know. But it wasn't that. It was that I really felt like I joined to make a difference, and I wasn't doing that as support.
It's like no immediate satisfaction at all.
It's not even the immediate satisfaction. It's the long-term satisfaction. Like, I made a difference. You know what I mean? Like, when I was in the Canadian military and you're infantry, I mean, you're out there depending on what your mission is, but there's a mission that's there that there's definitely some way to qualify it or quantify the measure, right?
Yep.
So with maintenance, there's a maintenance cycle, and there's always stuff that's broken and always stuff that needs to get fixed, right? And no matter how you try to change that, like
more like just working on an assembly line or a conveyor belt.
Exactly. Or there's no way to make it better, right? So like prime example, like dealing with the infantry, you could be like, hey, this truck is broke because of some serious misuse, bro. Like, what the crap were you thinking? And that person isn't held accountable, right? But now it falls on your shoulders. So what I'm getting at is, oh yeah, there's a 72 coming up, and then the grunts would bring all this gear over just to get it off of there,
gear.
Right? And it's like, why didn't you bring this to me a week ago or 2 weeks ago? You know what I mean? Because they can't go on their 72 or 96 until it's taken care of. Well, the easiest way to do that is dump it on support, right? And so a lot of good support dudes, we just handle that. We just shoulder that, take care of it and stuff like that. But that's what I mean. But you couldn't say, hey man, bring that to me a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier. Oh, okay, gotcha. And then same shit next time. You know what I mean? There's that repetitive cycle. So there's no way really to fix the system, I guess you could say, unless you had like special relationships with certain people, right? And that's what it ends up boiling down with everything in the Marine Corps. Right? Doesn't matter. It's always that who you know and how you can
network and cultivate your relationships
to get what you need. So
I'd venture to say that's everywhere in life, though. Like,
absolutely.
Like, it's not just the Marine Corps. It is for us because that's where we started. But networking and building relationships in the civilian world is
absolutely,
it's everything.
And then you just hope that they're not going to backstab you.
Yeah.
Like, at some point, it's that relationship. Like, how do you, like with a relationship, is there a dollar amount to it or a certain time for, like, what is it worth to you to turn your back on that person? And that's what it boils down to. Like, and that's where, in the Marine Corps, we turn into yes men, or not. Some people turn into yes men. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to that person is going to be more worried about their career and their family and a paycheck versus
maybe something that's right.
Maybe something that's morally above the fray. Yeah, absolutely, dude. So that's where we're going with that. But yeah, Okinawa.
Yeah, and that's everywhere too, right? Like, if somebody gets leveraged because, I mean, imagine that you start a new job and you think it's a stepping stone job, or it's just to get by job, but then you become dependent on the money.
Right. And,
then maybe there's an economic crisis in the world, and now it's like jobs are soaked up and money's expensive, gas is going up, and then like now you're dependent on that. Right. And now instead of chasing your dreams, you're working some menial task, getting depressed and anxious about your lot in life. That's the big problem in our country right now.
No, that's exactly. Well, it's not just our country. That's the world. Maybe, but here's the thing. That's socialized behavior.
Yeah.
So we are trained to be like that, And in the military, you can see it a little bit more. If you go in and then you get out, you can kind of have that 20/20 hindsight, right? So it's very black and white to me, and I don't want to say the words indoctrination or things like that because it's really not that, but it's socialized behavior, it's socialized culture. Yeah. Like, prime example in the Marine Corps, right? You are trained right from boot camp that weakness is not to be tolerated, right? So it doesn't matter what personal issues you have, whether it's physical, mental, anything. If you are the weakest link, now we need to go ahead and
sort you out,
push you. Usually it's like, we got to fap you out. Like, you're going to go work here, work there.
Got to make you go away.
You're no good to your MOS. You're no good to the battalion or whatever the company. We need to get rid of you, regardless of whether or not they're going to fix you. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, That's the biggest thing I see, where we're just taught to kick people down the ladder. Like, so you look at going for a run, right? And you get a guy that injures his knee or something. Hey, I'm going to need like 2. Oh, dude's got an injured knee. Like, screw that dude, man. Like, he's weak or
broke.
whatever.
Yeah.
Well, how about instead of doing that, how about we get him fixed? And then he's like, why do you got to turn your back on him for that week or 2 weeks? Mm-hmm. But that's how we're trained, right? Mm-hmm. It's all
it's
about
the institution. Like, the institution is all alpha all the time. And the second that there's that beta, the second that there's that weakness, and in my experience, sometimes it wasn't even like the weakness brought the dogs out on you. It was almost like the weakness was looked at as leprosy, and you didn't want to. It's like, I got to separate myself from him because I don't even want my mind to know that's real.
Right. No, that's exactly.
And that's like the culture. And when that's the culture, and then you have a problem and you're weak, it doesn't matter how close your boys are. It's contagious. Nope. Right. I don't want to associate with that. I don't know what's going on there. And it may be a legit injury.
Right.
And maybe it's a legit thought in the mind. I don't want my mind to ever even think that somebody that was with me through all this could be hurt, because then maybe it'll think it could be hurt.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know how much of that's good or bad, but I know that it doesn't help us when the top echelons of the institution are like that.
Right. No, and that's, I mean, to me, like, that's one of the biggest things. Like, maybe it's changed now, but going through the Marine Corps and then transitioning out, that was one of the biggest pieces that I felt like we get left behind a lot, is the transition piece, right? And so, like, when I was over at Wounded War Battalion, I'll never forget, I was coming through the front gate, and there was a dude that was, actually, that's a different story. When I was at Wounded War Battalion, there was a guy there that I was talking to, it's probably like S3 or somebody, and we're not by name or anything, but we're just going over the situation. And there was a guy that popped on a piss test for heroin, right? And so they immediately throw him in the brig, right? He's over at Wounded War Battalion. They immediately throw him in the brig. They're admin sepping him. They pick him up from the brig. They take him to the front gate, admin sept, and kick him out. And it's like, but if you looked at the whole story, of course that's like unmarine-like behavior, right? But what's the underlying issue? Like, you don't just start shooting heroin. You know what I mean? What's the underlying issue? And then it turns out that old boy, had an injury, he obviously got PTSD too, but had an injury, is on medications. They cold turkey stop his medications.
Now he's withdrawing.
Then he starts drinking, right? Drinking leads to X, Y, Z. Now then he starts doing heroin. So they're not. So what I'm getting at is we look at that, because it's such egregious bad behavior by that Marine. He can no longer be a Marine, and we're not going to take care of him. But being in the Marine Corps and being in the situations he was in, that's what causes the injury. You see what I'm saying? And so now the Marine Corps is turning their back on this guy. Now, I'm not saying I agree with shooting heroin, but bro, there's got to be a better way than putting him in the brig, admin sepping him. Like, how about we put him in a rehab facility or do that? Like, maybe he can't be rehabbed and be a Marine anymore, but he's obviously over at Wounded War Battalion for a reason, right? Like,
well, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said too about the way in which we transition Marines, regardless if they're shooting heroin, especially injured Marines. I think injured Marines come home, and like we just said, you got that contagion, and you got that weakness exuded because you're injured either psychologically or physically. And then it's like, okay, well, so you're off the numbers. Now you're over at Wounded Warrior Battalion, let's say. Well, over there, you're all alone. So now you're doing your regiment, you're doing your medication, you're doing your thing. There's a better way we could do all of that. And I think maybe we're there. They got the new Skill Bridge program going on right now, which guys are actually going to the college and getting professional classes that probably were better than SEPs and TAPs. However, I haven't been through it. I'm still trying to learn about it. But that's probably a better way. But guys that get shot up, blown up, things of this nature, then they're on opioids for maybe sometimes years.
Right.
Because of different surgeries and things of that nature. Like, that's the starting point that we got to get to, so that the alcohol and other drugs never becomes an issue.
Right.
And like, if that means we don't cold turkey you anymore and we got to find therapeutics to wean you off, so be it. And if that means we go hard at big pharmaceutical as a federal institution and say, hey, there's treatments that work that you're not allowing us to give to our people here. I've talked about it on the show a lot, like people going for ibogaine treatment or ayahuasca treatment and things of this nature, and you can't do it here because it's a $250 million lobby against it.
Right.
With the people that make decisions. So I think there's still a long way we could come with guys that are combat injured, or even not combat injured, but injured in line with their service. It doesn't always have to be combat that you get an injury that you have to go on medication or whatever for.
Right.
And then I think there's a little bit of discounted. For me, I feel like there's some situations that where people are like, oh, we're not worried about that. Oh, we're not worried about that. That's just, that's just a weird injury. Well, it's like, well, maybe like that knee injury, that orthoscopic surgery that put him down for 6 months and he gained weight and he's not ideally all right in the head right now because you've removed purpose from his life for 6 months, put him on drugs. He maybe, now he's not even feeling like himself. So it doesn't always take a combat situation to,
right.
To knock somebody off kilter. And then I think we just need to do better by, definitely by transition, but definitely by these guys that are coming back. There's got to be better processes set in place so that that situation doesn't come to fruition.
Right. Well, I think part of it is too, for me, or like a big piece of it, it's culture, right? And so we look at like the evolution of culture, right? So if you look in the Marine Corps, well, say you went to boot camp in the 80s, right? And now you're in charge in the 2000s. Well, it's drastically changed in that 20 years, right? And so, when we go through boot camp, we're told like injuries are bad. So you don't, first off, you don't want to report an injury. As the injured guy, you do not want to come out of pocket and say, you need help, or I've got this, or I've got that, because now you're already getting kicked down the ladder, or you're being looked at in a derogatory fashion, right? Well, that's a cultural thing, right? That's bred into us. Well, imagine being like prime example now is all the people that are in charge, or went to boot camp in the maybe 80s, 90s. Well, no, I guess it'd be like 90s, 2000s now, and they're doing gender transitions and shit like that. Like back then, you can't even probably comprehend that. Like you just aren't. It wasn't a part of our society, or a big part of our society. So like getting socialized behavior in school and things like that, that is not even something that's in your wheelhouse. So all these people that you look at it like we call them dinosaurs, right? Oh, he's dinosaur because he's already hit his peak. He's of no use, no relevant use to anything anymore. There's no evolution going on, right? But they stick around for a year to 5 after that, right? And so I think that's a big part of it, is that we have people that should have left a while ago because they're irrelevant, right? Put somebody that has
new blood, almost
some new
ideas.
Exactly. Like it's all about. That was one of my big things in the Marine Corps. We're supposed to be this fast moving force, right? Stay light, stay have a lot of ingenuity, be fluid on the battlefield, all this stuff. But then we're not in doctrine. Like I'll never forget, I was at advanced course, years ago, obviously, but we had a committee come down from headquarters Marine Corps, a bunch of random, enlisted cats. I don't think there's any officers, and they were just doing Q&A with all these, staff NCOs and stuff like that. And like I had a question. I was like, well, look, we've been at war in Iraq for 10 years, Afghanistan for 10 or 12 at the time, whatever it was. I said, and every time we have to do these, everybody does after action reports, right, from the battalion on down. So you get these big after action reports that are like, hey, this is what's going on, this is what's relevant. And then the next battalion that's leaving, they're reading the after action report of the guy that was just there, so they get a good feel for like atmospherics, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, out of all those, at all this time that we've been doing, how much of that has changed Marine Corps doctrine? And it was like this just glazed over look, and it was like none. I'm like, so hang on. And for me, I was an EOD guy, explosives, after I moved from being a mechanic. And so my thing is like staying on top of the environment. Like, what is going on? What's the new trends? What's this? That's people's life. That's life and death, Yep. And so I'll never forget, it was like reinventing the wheel every time we deployed, because you'd get with a new grunt unit that was going out, like say 1-6, right? Hey, 1-6, what's going on? And then it would be this new influx of NCO staff, NCOs, and you might have a boot drop in there too. And it was like, okay, and they would be going through their TNR standards, and everything was all about ambushes, gunfights. But it wasn't a lot about explosives. So they're all getting this side training, and then when you get to Leatherneck or Ramadi or wherever you're at in Iraq,
quick little course.
You're doing a quick little course. As, hey, this is how you use a mine detector. Like, bro, you should have been training on that for 6 months. Like, that's your lifeline out here. You know what I mean? If you're the head of the squad, you need to know how to do that. And they wouldn't do that. And it's kind of like, how is this not doctrine? Like, this is what's known to work. This is what's saving lives. If we're supposed to be fluid on the battlefield, then how about you be fluid in the scripture, right? Be fluid in the pubs for war fighting and stuff like that. But
what
it
do you
doesn't
think
change.
The reason is?
They just can't. They can't.
Does it change too fast to even write it down?
Because of the process. I think it changes so fast that, like, if you look at like TCOM, right? So if you're at a TCOM school, you have certain criteria that you gotta hit, right? So let's say you have 4 things. You're going to go to school for whatever it is, but there's 4 criteria that you need that have been pass or fail, right? So You write the curriculum, everybody comes in, they come together, they say, okay, this is smart. You do the curriculum, you do a couple like proctored classes where it's not for grade or anything like that. You get some feedback, you change what you need to change, and then it's doctrine, right? So if something changes from that, to change it to make, because TCOM, it's all about funding, right? And so this is what the standard is. This is the amount of money you get for that. These are the criteria that you're teaching. Don't deviate from that, right? So because it's a standard, right? And because it's like a TCOM school, it's pass or fail. It might be, it could be something that changes your MOS for all shits and giggles, right? Like you could get a little new number or new moniker or whatever. So they have to have that standard, and that's what it's about. It's about meeting that standard. So if they were to implement something new, well, the guys 5 years ago didn't do that. Do you know what I mean? So now there's a difference in that standard. That would be, I think it would just be too great to transition to, but I don't think that should stop us from doing it.
Well, what about you guys? What about, did you watch evolution of tactics and TTP's best practices while you were part of the EOD community?
Oh, absolutely. So,
but was any of it written down as doctrine?
So we change. There's certain time frames that we need to change our pubs and stuff like that. And like good commanders, if they're going out, they'll do a supplemental, like, hey, these are the trends. This is, or they'll give you a work statement, like, this is what EOD can do. This is what we don't do. This is what I expect you not to ask my guys to do, whatever. And they can absolutely put that out there, basically at the battalion level or the RCT level. But for the most part, what we're really good at is what people forget, like EOD, it's not just about, picking apart bombs and doing all that. Everything's intelligence driven. And so for us, it's all about exploitation, right? We want to get as much evidence as we can. We want to put together targeting packaging. We want to put these motherfuckers in the ground. You know what I mean? And so that's the big thing. So it's like this a lot of times we're retroactive on the battlefield, not proactive. The good guys are proactive, but it's very hard to do in a conventional environment, right? Is to be proactive, just the way things go. But for us, the big, like, what's really good about us is we're such a tight-knit community that we have workarounds for a lot of the intel and stuff like that. So, like, immediately, like, if, like, I was in Sangan for a couple tours there, within the battalion, you're going to have, there was basically 12 EOD guys, like 6 teams. And out of those 6 dudes, we probably nightly, as EOD as a whole, would be passing information, right? And it might not just be on a daily trend or something like that, but it might be something... different things that were working for us or whatever, because we want to keep everybody like on the newest,
as spun up
as possible, dude. Like it's because it's scary. Like, we went into Sang and there was 12 of us. I think only 8 of us left of our own volition. You know what I mean? That's huge. And we're the subject matter experts. You know what I mean? The stuff's it's not the safest stuff out there. You know what I mean? Right. So you do get bit every once in a while, but that's the big thing. So you want to make sure that everybody's, like, I would feel horrible if there was a piece of information that I could pass on that I didn't because my VSAT was down, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's tons of workarounds for that. But.
Or how about one of the issues that I know I've experienced is, like, the lack of dissemination of information because of parochial unit personalities. How about that?
Yeah, well, so here's, some funny shit. Is, every AO, you have a battalion commander, right? That battalion basically owns the AO, unless it comes to MARSOC. MARSOC's a little bit different. But within that AO, if you're traversing the AO, you're supposed to give them a heads up. Hey, we're coming up your southern border. Hey, we're going through your northern border, whatever. So if you're a mobile asset, like the RCTs or the route clearance, route clearance teams, you're going to let them know, like, hey, man, we're going to be through your AO in a bit. We're traveling on this road. Hey, and, everybody's got a BFT, so you're watching it anyway. The watcho's watching it. Well, I'll never forget, we were in Marja, and we were in, the port shop. We were just south of where you guys were at. Yeah. And we had it was Colonel Christmas, actually.
You've told me about this.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Christmas, right? And so they were on a convoy up from, like Fob Marja, which was to the south, and they were rolling through our AO. And we had a unit that had marked and bypassed a IED, right? So just luckily I happened to be in the COC and I'm watching these dudes and I heard the watcho come on and say, yeah, you're clear, like roll on through. And I'm like,
hold on. Somebody marked bypass as, like, even you guys were tracking where it was marked?
Our COC was tracking where this
and
possible,
then they're going to send Christmas right on
where a
into
possible
it?
ID was, and they were sending them up the route. And I'm like, hang on, watcho, like, hang on, hey, hold him there. I said, didn't you just get a report? Like, we got an IED right there. And he's like, yeah, well, the jump platoon didn't have EOD with them. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, well, listen, we can spin up, because we were only like maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles away in RPB. I'm like, hey, we can roll out there. Just, get us QRF. We can roll out there and take care of it before he gets up there. I mean, I'd hate to interrupt, this movement or whatever. But the only reason why they didn't hit that IED is because I just happened to be there and happened to catch what was going on. Do you see what I'm saying? So how many other people does that happen to? I don't know. But anyway, we get out there and it was Colonel Christmas. He's a trip, Lieutenant Colonel Christmas. But we get out there and, take care of it. Probably took us, and it wasn't just one. There wasn't just one.
Marked and bypassed several?
Bro, they had marked and bypassed, like there was a possible, right? So they put it on there. There's like 3 or 4 of them. I don't even remember. So I'm out there just like fishing these things out, and then they finally roll up, and he comes up on me. He's like, "Hey, how much longer do you think?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I really don't know, bro. Like, I've moved.
How safe would you like it to be?
I mean, I've moved 5. Like I get you want to go get.
We'll let you roll right now.
Get a hot in a cot or whatever. But it's pretty funy. So we took care of those right quick. But yeah. So just you talked.
Were they intact?
They're functional. Yeah.
I know in the beginning we found a lot, and our guys that were embedded with us, our EOD, they were like, "Yep, these are not intact," or "Yep, these are too old," or "Yep, these devices aren't functional right now."
Yep.
Probably they buried a bunch of them in anticipation of us coming. I don't know, but
well, there was some legacy stuff there. But one of the things, like people don't realize, they had an arming switch. A lot of times, like in Marja, they were using an arming switch, which just basically means they had this IED set up, and then the circuit wasn't complete, and so they could put it in the road, and you could travel over it all day long, and then they would arm it up, right?
After it'd been there for a while. So you had no atmospherics, like, because, like if you're lead Vic, the first thing you're looking for is ground signs. And a lot of times you can see that because something just doesn't look right when you're in the vehicles. And so that's what they were really doing. So in Marja, because it's very narrow grid roads, right? Yep.
And so that's what they do is they knew that, hey, we got foot traffic. So, you'd see little Toyota Corollas ripping up and down and stuff like that. And then they would try to time it. And they'd go arm it up quick and stuff like that. So
I know they started using packing peanuts on us there too. Like, so the lead Vic would crush the circuit down a little bit with packing peanuts, the second Vic a little bit more. So it looks like it's a command det when Vic 3 blows up. Yeah. And they just started finding them, and it'd be like, they'd have trash bags wrapped over the pressure.
Yeah.
And then hundreds of packing peanuts in between.
Yeah, just to crush it.
The boards, yeah. I mean, I thought it was genius.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
I mean, it's funny, we come up with all the workarounds, and then they're beating the workaround with $1 worth of extra electrolytes. So like when we went to the mine rollers, right? Oh, we're gonna put this mine roller out there and it'll blow up everything, and then we're not losing vehicles. We're just messing up mine rollers, and we can fix those easy. Well, people didn't think, well, let's just offset the pressure switch by 14 feet or however long a mine roller is, right? So the mine roller hits it, and now the main charge is under the vehicle. Like, so you're adding in like 14 feet of white lamp cord. Well, how much is that in a bazaar in Afghanistan?
Nothing,
right? So you see these. But the thing is the contract had already been placed for the mine rollers, and I'm sure it's some retired Marine that
multi-billion-dollar
contract, right? Exactly. So that's
and then we like our mine rollers so much that we start getting angry when line elements are destroying too many mine rollers. And it's like, hey, hang the fuck on! Didn't we buy them to blow them up?
Right. Right.
Interesting how that all goes.
Oh, I know, dude. Yeah. Yeah. But
I'm not mad about it, but it's like
it doesn't make sense though.
But I mean that side of it, the administration side, it's always going to be fucked up political and a racket. But like on our side of it, war will always be us changing TTPs, them fixing them, us changing, them fixing, work around right. For the advantage.
But from our side, one of the big things is like when there's a problem, we're just going to throw money at it, right?
No,
and I don't mean money as in, okay, we need to come up with a solution and, this is how much it's going to cost for that solution. What I'm talking about is that sustainable money. Mm-hmm. Like now you've got a company that just opened up and bid on a contract that now has the rights to build this workaround, whether it works or not. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's almost like...
and when it falls out of effectiveness as a workaround, we're still going to continue to buy it.
Right, because you still got 2 years on the contract.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
Now we have warehouses full of tchotchkes.
And it doesn't even fucking work anymore. Right.
You look at like EOD gear, right? Like we've gone through so many iterations of different things that we get. Like it's the new hottest item, or whatever, like tools, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, we need that. But by the time it gets approved and gets to us, if they didn't open purchase it, a lot of times it's sitting on shelves. So we had these things, a robot system called the Rons. It's massive. It got to weigh like 800 pounds or 1,000 pounds. It's massive.
What is it?
It's a big robot
for EOD
for exploitation, stuff like that. But it's not something that works very well in the
Hey,
sand.
how much does that cost us?
Oh, I don't even know, dude.
A lot.
Stupid.
A lot. Well, so we had the Talon. I think the Talon was like $600,000 for the Talon, I think.
Like a piece per
black,
robot.
The black one that we used to always use that had the arm on it, right? And then we had the Packbot, which was a little bit cheaper, like $300,000, I think. But the Rons, it's got to be $1 million, dude. Like, no lying. We had a couple of them, when we transitioned from Iraq to Afghanistan. They were sitting in a Quad-Con or Connex box in Afghanistan. We never used it because it's useless there. But what I'm getting at is that's something that we get fed, bomb suits, right? I don't know if you've ever been in a bomb suit in 120-degree weather.
Negative.
What people don't get, it's like
Hard pass.
the difference between a bomb suit and not a bomb suit on a IED call is whether it's an open casket or closed casket burial.
Still going to kill you.
Still probably going to kill you. So bomb suits, the way they calibrate a bomb suit is they use basically 1 pound equivalent of TNT. 1 pound, right? IEDs are 20 to 50 pound was probably the normal in Afghanistan. So it's never even been tested against something that bad, right? So you're gonna be whole, right? But you're probably gonna have a little bit of brain.
Well, and not to mention that the shockwave, the shockwave could kill you alone, depending on the size of the jug.
You'd be surprised how many do. Like, we got to go, EOD, we get tested with a lot of random weird stuff too. But we do a lot of post-blast, right?
Yep.
Post-blast analysis.
Yep.
So anytime they drop ordnance or whatever, we go out there and do battle damage assessments, stuff like that. And you'd be surprised how many, and I've got my own theories on this, but, especially in Afghanistan, Marines, we wear a lot of gear, right? So we probably got, the average guy probably has like 40 to 60 pounds of gear on him at least, right?
At least, yeah.
When you're outside the wire. And so I believe that a lot of the stuff that when they step on it, a lot of times they lose limbs because of basically gravity, right? They have so much weight, extra weight on there, the explosion takes the path of least resistance. Because a lot of the Afghanis, they're wearing like manjamas and maybe a chest rig, maybe. If they're the IED guy, they probably don't even got a gun on them. And when they get blown up, they just get launched. They're not missing limbs. Do you see what I'm saying? We're missing limbs because we're heavier, like we're wearing all that
more
gear.
force to launch it.
All
so
that
it's breaking shit.
Absolutely, and that's what I truly believe. Because even like air ordnance, you put it on air burst. We'd roll up, and there would be dudes that were no fragmentation or any type of bodily injury other than the shock killed them. You know what I mean? Like just rattled their brain. Basically,
I just did an interesting interview with Dr. Brandeis. He's a world-renowned, or at least nationally renowned and award-winning urologist. We talked about shockwaves. Long story short, he talks about like how they used focused shockwaves to break up kidney stones. He said we hit them about 3,000 shockwaves in a 20-minute period, about 100 shockwaves a minute kind of thing. And I said, but is that because somebody tested if 4,000 shockwaves? He said, oh yeah, it'd destroy your liver or your kidney. It could really damage you. And I said, well, is it safe to say that ID, blah, 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 blah. He's like, of course. Of course that's doing things. And then if you think about like training ballistically when we're shooting, the reason we do a hammered pair is not necessarily because we wanted to hit 2 holes in you really quick, but because we know if we do it right, that shock from those
times 10.
It's ripping you apart and can shut your organs down without you bleeding out. So we know about it.
So what's funny,
we still know a lot about what it's doing up here, I think, and what it's doing in here.
Well, so it's not just the brain. Like I've again, being an EOD guy, and having TBI, you go through, you look at, you're like, what? How can I fix this? What's going on? So I've done a lot of research in different areas on that. But what I truly believe is that one thing that gets overlooked, and there's been certain research paths that have had it, is that frequency, right? So we talk about oscillation. When blast goes off, there's oscillation. Well, every different organ in your body oscillates at a different frequency. That's what it gives back. So not only like when we talk about the signal from your brain to your organ, it's part of that is the frequency it's on. So it's megahertz, right? And it's this and it's that. So a lot of what we consider TBI, or this is the way I believe it, I should say that, is that it might not necessarily be your brain. Maybe your brain is getting feedback from your liver, and your liver is oscillating at a different frequency. And now it's telling your brain, hey, we need to adjust this because we need to adjust that frequency, right? So then it gets such bad information that now your brain is trying to change what that frequency is, and it can't. You know what I mean? So then maybe your brain will shut down that organ, or your brain will shut down,
or it drops a differut hormone because it thinks you're lacking, or
shuts
whatever.
down that signal, right? Like, I can't listen to that. It's bogus, right? And that's what I see with that. But again, there's so much. Again, I think one of the reasons why there isn't a lot of research on this stuff is because the more research they do, the more money they're going to have to give people that get out and have, like, you look at people that were shell shocked from back in the day.
Try justifying going to a range and shooting small rockets to get good at it, or AT4s to get good at it, when you know as an institution that possibly just one of those is could jack your brain up, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. A lot of guys that I know that are assault men or like that were tow gunners and things of that nature, that maybe they never even fired one of those at war, but they fired 15 of them over here at Lejeune on KD ranges trying to get good at it. And they're wondering why they have this anxiety or these migraines or this, like, and they tell, I never even went anywhere. And it's like, yeah, because I don't believe it's so much the experience of what you've seen.
Yeah.
I think it's the concussions, constant hits that you take either in training and in war, but you constantly taking these shock waves that we don't know what it's doing.
Yep.
And nobody seems to be running out in the front line to figure it out for us, at least from the military.
Right.
You know,
so
you have the football players are kind of doing it. But
that's where we're going to get all the research from. It's going to be like something CTE, like where they're mandated to do it, NFL, right? Mm-hmm. So back to the shock waves and stuff. If you're like back in the, you can look at publications from years and years and years ago. But martial artists, they've known about frequency, right? So we talk about dim mak or like death touch, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's basically what that is that you want to hit pressure points, 2 or 3 of them at the same time, and you will shut down somebody's body.
For a shock.
Because of the shock, because it does a hard reset on your brain. That's what it is. It's because
is that the one that, like the judo chop thing they do up here or the back of the neck?
Listen,
stuff?
You don't even need to hit the neck. I'm talking in the arm, in the leg, in the whatever. If you hit the right pressure points at the pretty much the right pressure at a certain interval of time, you shut somebody down, right? And that it's the same as a hammered pear. Mm-hmm. That's what that is. It just amplifies. It's like you look at when you're throwing rocks in a, like skipping them in a pond, right?
Yep.
And you throw that one and you get those nice concentric circles rippling. Well, if you throw one and as soon as it starts rippling, you throw another one, when that other one gets in there, it's devastating to what it does to those ripples, right? And that's what the whole point of the hammered pear.
Yeah, kind of like a boat by itself going through the waters doing this, and then when that wake, now it's fine, it's just going to spread out. But when another boat's wake comes and meets them, it's kind of like,
look what it does to the shoreline,
like the washing machine.
Yeah, look at what it does to the shoreline. Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I see with that. But
yeah, man, interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of our generation, at least mine, I know you're older than me, but the same kind of war fighting generation. A lot of us have issues that I don't think. Look, I'm no expert, but I did a lot of research on my own injuries, as you do.
Right.
I'm not completely sold that inflammation in the brain can't cause a lot of the issues that are associated with PTS. What's your take on that? Like so anxiety.
I agree with that, but I also think, so here's my own take on like PTSD, right? Or PTS, whatever we want to call it. I truly believe, because, we always revert back to like war. Well, what's the difference between, like, why would somebody in war have PTSD versus you get in a car wreck and you are in the seat beside your wife who is dying?
Sure.
Like, why is that? But what I'm getting at is we always talk about the suicide rates, right? And we attribute it to PTSD. Well, why isn't that person contributing to
correlating over to the same
there's no
numbers.
Correlation to me. So, that really got me thinking about it. And what I truly believe, like, PTS is, it's based out of ignorance, okay? And what I mean by that is, like, we go into war, we're kind of trained, okay, we're socialized in some aspects, like, you look at your enemy like they're not human beings, right? Like, that's number one. There's a whole bunch of things that go into this, right? But what I truly believe, like PTSD it's you questioning your morality, all right? And what I mean by that is, like, I've seen guys that have really bad PTSD that were what we'd call fobbits, that sat on leatherneck. But here's the thing. If you're outside of the wire and you know what's going on, and whether you see it or you now you're hearing it, right? Like, maybe it wasn't your platoon or your section, but it was somebody else's. You can put 2 and 2 together in your head because you've seen it. So there's no ignorance there for you. It's like, yeah, okay, the reason why this guy got shot is because of X, Y, and Z. Like, he bobbed instead of weaved. Like, if I'm out there, I'm only going to weave. I'm not going to bob. And you can justify that. Well, if you're a fobbit and all you're seeing is on the transverse, but you have no idea, like, you don't know what the enemy looks like. You don't know what a patrol is. You grasp the concept, but you really don't know. So you see all this stuff, and it's like, oh, PB, some patrol base that only has 12 Marines on it was attacked. Well, you're sitting on Leatherneck now thinking that Leatherneck's going to get attacked. Nah, fam, there's like thousands of fucking dudes on here. Like, you don't have to worry like you do with the 12 dudes.
But you don't know that.
And so that's what I truly believe, like, a lot of the PTS stuff. is it's stuff that questions your morality, right? Like I can give you like when I was we were in Marja, right? We did the push into Marja. We were down south, and I get this call on the radio, and we don't even have vehicles there. We heloed in, right? So we got little squads popping, here and there, and we're pushing our we're trying to get our cordon, set quite a bit larger than what it was, our footprint. And so I get this call like, hey man, we got a possible ID out here. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And they're like, oh, it's a wires going into a trunk, and it was in somebody's house. Well, in Marja, they knew we were coming in because we're dropping leaflets and stuff like that, right? And a lot of people, they don't realize, like Taliban, they put up checkpoints at that point because what they're going to do is they're going to extort you. Oh, you want to leave the area? Like we're not holding you hostage, but if you don't pay the toll, you're not leaving the area. Yeah. Well, then that goes again. It's the same thing they're doing in Ukraine, right? So we know that we're not going to bomb certain areas because there might be locals, like civilians, right? So that's what they do is they try to keep all those people huddled together unless they want to pay, right? Oh, you want to pay to leave? Okay. So, basically when we went into Marja, the only people that were left were the people that didn't want to pay the toll. So you're talking like the elderly, the sick, like people are like,
people that just couldn't.
Hey, they're gonna die anyway. Yeah, or the ones that couldn't afford to, or whatever. So we get up there, we get into this compound. The compound's pretty much been cleaned out because they'd already moved all their stuff to Lashkar. So I get up there and there's this trunk, and it looks like just like a trunk here, right? Like it was green. I got a wire coming out of the back of it, and I look at the wire. I'm like, that's not connected to anything, But I don't want to ever like put the thing up, like especially with the grunts. I was never ever like dumbass, like don't ever.
You want them to see that stuff.
I don't care if you're right. You call me 100% of the time. Like I'm rolling out there. If it's trash, I'm going to be like, hey man, that was trash, but I want you to look at this. Like the reason why it was trash is because of X, Y, and Z. So I use it as a learning opportunity, right? Like, hey, we're going to calibrate this because, like for me in Marja, we never lost a dude to an IED. The whole time I was in Marja, which to me is a pretty big claim to fame. Yeah. And I'm not saying it was me or anything like that, but I was able to get down to the section level and be able to calibrate everybody to be like, this is what you're worried about, this is not what you're worried about. Hey, if you see this, and we were able to alleviate. That's not to say people didn't get injured. Yeah. I'm just saying we didn't lose any lives from that. So anyway, I'm dealing with this box, and it's locked, which was odd. So, of course, lockpick sets, all that crap. I'm like, all right, let's get in here. And I get in there, and I open it up, and there's this, it's like a very nice cloth wrap, right? So I'm like, oh, it's somebody's Quran, right? Like they wrap their Quran, and they put it in here. But then I'm thinking to myself, well, why would they?
Why the wire?
No, well, the wire. So the wire was just irrelevant. It was like literally, it was like when they built the mud hut, there was a piece of wire, or maybe they had run it from outside and it was connected to something, but it wasn't even like in the box or touching the box. So I peel back the cover, and I realize it was a dead baby, right?
Holy shit!
And I'm like, what the crap? Like this is what? Like just blows my mind, right? And so I'm sitting there looking at this, like, what the crap? And then, obviously, I'm like, okay, well, this ain't no ID, but now we've got this, dead child that we got to deal with. And so, we take the body back to the PB, and there's a Shura like a day or two later, and the dude that owned the compound comes rolling up there. And this is what people don't get. So, like, matter-of-factly, this guy's just telling us that he was moving all his stuff from Marja to Lashkar Gah, and he didn't have room in his car for his little girl. No, not the trunk, for his little girl. She was alive. He didn't have room for his little girl in the car. And this is like, but it's a girl, right? So again, little girl in the car. So he had put her in the trunk because he was planning on coming back later that day to get her. But then he got too tired. So he stayed in Lashkar Gah, and she died from the elements. Like it was just too cold, right? And so you're looking at this dude.
It's a different world.
You see what I'm saying? So, like, I've got daughters, right?
Yep.
I got a wife. I don't look at, like, people that they're worth different values for different things. Right. That's part of their society. So, like, for me, morally, that's not how I came up. So I can tell you that, I probably had a couple little PTSD, symptoms from that, or because it was comprehending it. I don't understand that. Yeah. And that's what I'm getting at. So I truly believe, like, a lot of the PTSD that people deal with is from ignorance, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean you cannot compare it to how your moral foundation, right? It's sacrosanct against that. So basically, for you to be able to understand that, you would have to rewrite how you were brought up, rewrite your
entire foundation,
which is a big rug pull, right? Which leads me to another thing, is why a lot of people have trouble when they get out of the Marine Corps transitioning, because their identity is a Marine. I'm a Marine, right? You're still wearing the jacket. You know what I'm saying? I'm a Marine. Well, now you're not a Marine. Well, you are. You're retired. right? Or you're just not active duty.
Or former, yeah.
So what are you going to do now? Like, hey, man, that's a chapter in your book, dude. Don't close that book. Like, you're not done yet. You got plenty of life to live. Like, go find what you want to do and do it. But that transition period is where they get screwed out of that, because it's like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow. It's like not knowing what you're going to do when you graduate high school, and now you've got 6 months left, and you're like, I guess I'm just going to do this, because you feel like you don't have options, or you're not set up for success to transition. Anyway, so I truly believe that's it's all.
I think the moral injury is, and we talk about civilian PTSD. I talk about that on a recording we did with my buddy Shrek, the painter, Robert, and he, there's a lot of things that can bring PTSD symptoms, or PTSD, call it, if it's an issue, and most of it is not the military.
No,
most of it is first responders, firefighters, things of that nature. They have more per capita than we ever did, and ever will have, hopefully. But people forget about that. So then, take those cops and firefighters, and then they're reservists and they deploy. Now you got multiple different things going on that you're dealing with. Take a teacher that was involved in one of these school stabbing, shootings, whatever that we've had here recently. Like, these people, those instances will change them for sure. But like you said, it doesn't have to define the rest of your life.
No, but it's a moral dilemma.
And now the moral dilemma, I believe, is worse than, for me, it was harder than any of them.
Right.
Calling a HIMAR in on a sniper and find out that there's 12 other people in there. Right. And then you don't understand it because they don't care. Right. Or things like that. Or like some HIMAR or other rocket incidents in Marja had damaged this one kid, and he got burned up real bad. Well, his dad carried him, up to Hanson, after Hanson was established, to go to the RAS. And the kid's between his knee and his ankle just slid down like a tube sock on his bone because it was so burned. Right, it was real bad. Both legs just looked like toothpicks. Right, no meat on them. And his dad wanted $10,000. Right, $10,000 made it go away. Right, and it's like, and then when you know that, it's like, what? If that was my baby, like I'd try to blow all of you up. Right. Like, you know what I mean? It's not a money. There's never would be a dollar amount, a money quantity that you could offer me for you hurting my family. Right. That's, you know what I mean? It's weird.
Yeah, we had a kid that ended up, he was going to be in a wheelchair. I can't remember if he lost his legs or if they just became unusable. But his dad basically, while we're triaging him, said, "Hey, just let him die. He's of no use to me in Afghanistan." Yeah, that's what he said. Like,
he'll be nothing but a burden to me now.
He's nothing but a burden. I will make another one, but not concerned about his child. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so odd to see that.
It's odd to us in the West, well, that's right. But for them who, since biblical times, have been playing this same game,
exactly my point.
That's just the way.
Yeah. So again, it goes to that moral dilemma. But I will tell you, the big difference in PTSD, I think, between military and civilians is, in the military, right? You go out on a patrol, you have a shitty situation, you're triaging dudes, you're CASEVACing, you go back. Guess what? You're resting, refitting, and you got to go out on that same patrol later that day or the next day. Whereas in the civilian world, when you get that trauma for first responders, a lot of times you get put on the bench. Like, hey, you got to go see the wizard. Hey, you got to go get medically cleared. Hey, you got to do this. So they have a lot better steps in place. Like, do we have battlefield psychologists in the Marine Corps that get deployed with forward units?
No.
Why?
Don't know.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there would be, I think, a lot of ways that we could mitigate a lot of this stuff. Luckily, like EOD, we did a bit of a pilot program for us. So when we deploy, when we come back, we don't fly straight back to the States. We were flying into Germany, and we do like a little 3 to 5 day stint where we would do a bunch of classes. Just basically,
like gear down classes.
Like gear down classes. Same thing that the SF community does, right? But we were seeing, because like probably percentage wise, we see more death and like dismemberment than any other regular dude, other than maybe mortuary affairs, right? But we see all of that. So again, like, I got a good buddy of mine, Adam. His first deployment with EOD, we went into Sangin. And his first 14 calls as an EOD guy were all like post blasts on Marines getting blown up. Yeah. So imagine that, right? You're the new guy. You're Nick the new guy. And the first 14 calls you go on aren't like, hey, disarming this or doing this. You're literally bagging up Marines. You know what I'm saying? So he's still in. He's a great dude. But, in the back of my mind, I always think about stuff like that. Like, man, like, what would his life look like a little bit different, if that wouldn't have been that case, right? But it is. And you just got to deal with it. So
I think, too, like, one of our issues is that I think it's almost like incentivized to be a victim in the service right now. And it's like, and maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but it's like, it feels like, especially after, coming home and the big telltale thing was like HKIA, when the HKIA situation happened, you seen a bunch of dudes that were there with you, that did work with you, and that like victimizing themselves. And I wonder how much of that victim culture is taking hooks, or is it contagious even?
So, I don't even think like we look at it like it's victim culture, but how about this? How about it's socialized behavior? Like, you're told what you have on your chest it makes you who you are in the Marine Corps in some regards, right? Like, not everybody buys into that. But if you don't have a Purple Heart, or you don't have a combat action ribbon, or you don't have deployment ribbons, you're nobody compared to this guy over here, right? And so it goes back to that culture. Like, when I was in the Canadian military, the day that I graduated Canadian military, like my boot camp and stuff like that, is the day that everybody started treating me as a man and with respect, right? Not that I wasn't before that, but what I mean is, in the military, you were treated with respect. So even me as a private, talking to a regimental sergeant major or a colonel or general, whatever, there was respect both ways, right? We don't really have that in the Marine Corps in some regards. It's directional. It's one way, right? And so you're constantly looking for that weakness in some regards, right? You want to know why you're better or worse than your peer, or that guy that's in charge of you, or the guy that's underneath you. And we validate that different ways. And so, like, prime example, right? You graduate boot camp and everybody's like, well, you're not a Marine, you've never been to the fleet. Then you get to the fleet and you're like, well, you're in the fleet, and then looking at well, you've never been to Iraq. Then you go to Iraq. Well, you've been to Iraq but haven't been to Afghanistan. Oh, you've been to Iraq and Afghanistan? Well, you weren't a drill instructor. Boot. You're constantly chasing this shit. Like, bro, I'm not competing with you. You know what I mean? Like, I get, like, hey, be proud of who you are and where you come from. But that's not me. And you shouldn't be judging me because of it. Right. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and so I see that. And so what I'm getting at, like, back to the victim culture, I think it's ingrained in us in some regards. And again, here's the thing. If you're that motor T operator, right, and your view of war is this, it's going to be different than an infantry guy, it's going to be different than an air wing guy, it's going to be different, whatever. So you know that to be competitive in your MOS, there's certain criteria that you want to hit, whether it's a B billet, whether it's a deployment, whether it's this or that. Everything else above and beyond that could be more beneficial, right? Like a combat action ribbon or a Purple Heart or any of this. Well, you get blown up in your vehicle, and as shitty as that is, if you come out whole and you're really not that injured, and now you start playing the victim, I don't even think that's playing the victim. I think that's just looking around like, hey, look at me, like I'm part of the club now. Do you know what I mean? And you're looking for a different piece of respect. Does that make sense?
Like a different validation?
Like a different validation, that's all it is. So it's like, yeah, I'm part of the club now. Like, there's certain clubs I don't ever want to be part of. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but we put so much honor in being in some of those clubs that I think that really
misplaced some honor.
Exactly. And I think people get led down that path because they're naive about what pride is or what honor is or things like that. Right?
I agree with you. I was just talking to one of the senior gunners, if not the senior gunner in the Marine Corps, Gunner Lacrosse, and he said the way that he thinks that, it was a longer conversation but kind of boiled down to the same tip, was the way that we fix that is pride, pay, and prestige in the infantry units. He said, if you're never recognized as anybody any different than the admin clerk, where's your pride? Where's your swelling pride going to come from in your, like you're a spirited corps to be that thing that is better?
Right.
If we don't pay you better,
right,
because you're clearly in more danger, you clearly work harder, you clearly go to the field, you're clearly doing these things, but you get paid the same as them. And then the prestige of being in that element. So I don't know if that's a badge or, an insignia or something, but he said he thinks if they can tackle the pride, prestige, and pay issue, that will help retain this new force design.
Yeah,
guys.
but
So
I agree with that, but I think
do
that's
too.
got to be done across MOSs.
I think so too.
Not just grunts. You know what I'm saying? And because I'll tell you this, like, you know, I started out as a mechanic, went EOD, and EOD, I just call myself a super pogue. Like, people are like, oh, you're not a pogue. Or, like, dude, I'm a pogue, but I'm a super pogue. Like, I'm going to sleep in a bed because I'm going to order myself a bed, and I'm going to put it in my hooch. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to order some of this. And I'm going to be eating steak and rice every day. Like, there's just certain things that come with you know, our community that are, you know, I love. But at the same time, I'll tell you what, there is nothing that impresses me more than somebody that's in support and is a rock star.
Yeah,
and
dude.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, you hit that mechanic, you hit that admin dude, you hit
Comm guy.
pays, whatever it is. You go to them and they're all about their job.
Right.
They're like the premier dude of their MOS. And what's sad is a lot of those dudes end up going administrative, right? They go to first sergeant and sergeant major because they understand that pay's going to increase, all that. Like, it's fast tracking it's fast tracking their thing. And maybe they don't, you know, they're going to tap out and it's going to be a clog of 5 years or 10 years to get a promotion.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So we kind of do a disservice there. But there's nothing that impresses me more, especially being in combat, that you can pick up a phone and know, no matter who they are, as a Marine, they're going to take pride in their job and they're going to get it done. And you don't have to supervise them, right? Like, hey, man, I'm hurting on this. Can you make it happen? Don't worry about it, bro. I got you.
Watch how fast I can do this.
Yeah, hang up the phone and it's on a bird the next day or whatever it is, right? And so I've always, like, that is the one thing in the Marine Corps that I pride myself on, is being a part of those people of, like, no matter, you know, the climb or place, it's happening. And if you call me and you need something, I'm dropping everything and I'm getting it done.
Yeah, and that's your personal brand.
Yeah,
like, for
absolutely.
your life. Everybody doesn't have that.
Absolutely.
Even every Marine doesn't have that. But yeah, it's interesting. All right, so coming back to, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things right now, but I want to kind of fast forward to your exit of the Marine Corps. And at this point, you have, like, what, a master's degree? Didn't you get your master's, or did you start your PhD in the Corps?
Yeah, so both. What's funny, you know, again, you know, I moved into EOD. EOD, absolutely great. You know, when we deploy, we're, depending on where you're at, but we live pretty austere, right? Like, I went on deployments where we didn't have internet. You know, we had a Whipple up at some point, but, you know, it wouldn't download or upload quick enough. That I was doing my, was I doing my master's degree at the time? I ended up getting, so it took me like 19 years to get my bachelor's, right? And then I got my master's and I got my PhD. But like I said, 19 years. So I started out doing, when I first moved down to Canada, or from Canada, I was doing correspondence. So it was like paperwork. They'd send you and do this. And so, you know, I'm just grinding away at courses. Well, I joined the Marine Corps, and one of the big benefits is obviously tuition assistance and, like, free education. So, like, literally, you know, I'm in Okinawa trying to get promoted quick. And I'm literally, my goal was to do every MCT known to man, right?
MCI.
Or MCI, MCI. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, all my friends are, like, going to the gym, or they're, like, playing Xbox or drinking. Yeah. And I'm like, I'll be there in a minute. And I'd, like, bang out an MCI, right? And I'm pretty smart, so it really was no big deal. And in fact, a lot of them, I'd go in there, and because they're bubble tests, you got a 50-50 chance. Well, once you narrow it down to 2 questions, right? So you got 4 answers, narrow it down to 2 answers, you got a 50-50. So I would take them cold. I wouldn't even read some of the manuals. I'm like, this is a no-brainer to me. Like, you know, being in the infantry, I'll, you know, do whatever it was, SMAWs or some bullshit. Like, okay. So I'm banging them out. So I ended up doing like 60 or 70 MCIs while I was in Okinawa. And then I'm like, oh, you give me points for promotion if I do college?
Roger.
Yeah, so I'm like, all right, well, let's do the college thing. So I started doing that. Anyway.
What was your bachelor's in?
My bachelor's was in Homeland Security.
Okay, and then
right?
your master's.
So I went through AMU, American Military University, which are great. You know, if you're in the service, I think they're phenomenal. Real easy to work with. But went and did that. Did my bachelor's. Was winding up my bachelor's while we were in Marja. So I always felt bad because I'd have to patrol a lot of times by truck down to the base that had internet to download my homework. Then I'd go back. I'd do all my homework, then take it back and upload, and then download the next assignments, right? And this is all what we're doing missions. So I'd feel really bad. Like, I'd always try to coordinate it and make it like, while we were doing something, I'd just hitch a ride with, you know, QRF or whoever else was going down there, and we'd be able to do that. And a lot of times I was able, because we were so IED heavy, a lot of the evidence I had to go turn it into the LEP down there. And so I would just like, kind of work it as we were doing that, which made it convenient.
Were your AMU instructors pretty flexible with you while you were deployed?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what as long as you're like to me, now that I am a college professor now, but the big thing is as long as you're proactive about it, right? Like if you, oh, hey man, sorry, I didn't get that assignment, and 2 weeks ago I was on a patrol, versus, hey man, I'm not going to be around for the next 2 weeks. I may or may not be on the internet. I'll try to get everything in prior to me leaving, but if I don't, hey, just letting you know. They were always cool about that.
Yeah, I mean,
my recommendation is
I went to AMU because of you. You kind of mentored me through who I should go through. End up doing Homeland Security. Probably had some of the same instructors. Maybe not. They were amazing. For me, they were very flexible. And I had the benefit of picking your brain like, hey, you've already had this degree through this school. What do you recommend? And you were able to set me up. Yeah. But I didn't know you did that in Marja. I didn't know that's where you were doing that.
Oh, yeah, dude. Like, and so that's what's funny. Like, I'd have a lot of dudes, and I'm a huge dude for education, right? Like, so, we're in Marja, and all my peers, like, I'm trying to outshine you, dude. Like, I'm competitive as shit. I might not tell you that to your face, but I am. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at you going, I'm not going to kick you down the ladder, but I'm gonna run some circles around you. And I was 10 years, 15 years older than most of my peers. So I want to make sure I'm in shape. I don't want to be that guy getting embarrassed. I'm gonna make sure that my brain's heavier than your brain. All that stuff. And so we're in these epic gun battles and IED exploitation things and stuff like that. And rather than go back and chill at the play Xbox and eat and shout, whatever, I'm doing homework. That's probably one of the reasons why I stayed sane. It gave me something to focus on. Yeah. But after that, I just rolled right into my master's degree. So I was doing my master's degree. I finished up my master's degree on my last deployment to Sangin. And then
business?
I had to do.
Was that business?
So I got my master's in national security. So I got my BA, Bachelor of Arts in Homeland Security, master's in national security, and then. When I was going out through Wounded Warrior Battalion, I was looking at becoming a college professor. I thought that'd be a great gig, right? But I want to do online exclusive. That way, it doesn't matter where I live. I can work from home. I can set my own hours, things like that, depending on the school. So that was my gig. Well, luckily, I had given my GI Bill to my daughter for the most part, and she became a doctor herself. She's a veterinarian. So I kind of used up a lot of the benefits. Well, I didn't think I'd need more education. I'd already finished my master's on tuition assistance. And I started looking at it, and I couldn't get hired on with just my master's. So I went and talked to vocational rehab, and they're like, we don't even know if that's possible. Like, you want your what? I'm like, my doctorate, like PhD, like, let's go. And so it took a while because it was like one of those things that nobody could figure out whether it would be authorized or not authorized. So I had to do all the legwork, right? I'm like, look, so I'm pulling up BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm like, check this out. This is how much money I could make. This is the job field. This is, the potential growth for that industry, things like that. Here's all the places I've applied with my master's degree. Here's a couple letters that came back and said, hey, it's got to be a terminal degree. Ipso facto, therefore I should be able to, if I got my PhD, I should be no-brainer to hire, right? Excuse me. And so that's what ended up happening. So I was in voc rehab. I was still going through Wounded Warrior Battalion, and they approved me. So I started doing my PhD program before I transitioned out of the Marine Corps. Continued on with it when I got out of the Marine Corps, and then wrapped it up. Did my dissertation defense a couple years ago, and started applying. Became an online professor. So now I just do consulting for certain people, certain things, entities, and do college professorizing.
Professing. That's college professing.
Professorizing. Yeah, it's a legit term.
You like it though? You like it?
I do and I don't. So I got my PhD. Right?
You earned it?
Yeah, I got it. GOT.
Got it.
I
like it.
So it's my PhD is in business administration for organizational leadership and homeland security. So what I really wanted was that leadership piece, right? Excuse me. Just because, I felt there was such a big difference between the Canadian military and Marine Corps in certain aspects of leadership that I really wanted to nail down what was going on with that, right? And so I think I kind of did that in some regard. But a lot of the leadership courses that I did, it's more like HR stuff. I shouldn't say HR stuff, but like if you were in a Fortune 500 company, you're the C-suite or executive level of this, like what's corporate social responsibility and things like that, right? So but a lot of that again plays into leadership, right? How you lead your company and stuff like that. So that's what I did. Now I just, online schools. For the most part, I just teach like Homeland Security, emergency disaster management, or intelligence, different intelligence factions. So,
like fusion? Do you cover fusion?
like the fusion centers?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
NCTC,
really dig
all that
that.
stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information out there. But again, I'm so I don't want to say I'm the odd man out, because that's not what it is. But a lot of people, like the traditional course or the avenue of approach for that is to have a criminal justice degree and you carry on stuff. I don't have a criminal justice background, but I can tell you anything about being outside of America and doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like exploitation, sensitive site exploitation, intelligence cycles, things like that. And I give you that military perspective. So I think a lot of the students really enjoy that, because a lot of them
it probably cuts out some of like the monotony of having a regular criminal justice suit and tie, professor that's done it tenured.
Well, absolutely. And not only that, a lot of them are in the industry. So a lot of police firefighters and things like that. So they already understand how that system works. They're looking for an edge. So they want to understand a better understanding of NIMS, like National Incident Management System or some other thing. And I can kind of give them that foresight. And, we do a lot of study on terrorism, which, I've been studying for years and years and years, right? Especially being in the military. Like, we have a totally different view on terrorism. So I do, I think one of the things I like to do is really get them to think. I don't like to, just speak and have them listen to me or
try
whatever.
to give you what you want.
Give me what I want. I really try to open their eyes. So, I do a lot of things on just perception, right? Like how the media portrays things, because a lot of it's current events. And so then you get them really asking questions like the Ukraine, right? And I'm not going to pick on the Ukraine too bad, but when you start seeing sensationalized articles about how farmers are stealing tanks, right? And then, hey, put up your hand and ask some questions. Like, hang on a second, what's the towing capacity on a tractor, right? How much does a tank weigh? Are you telling me that tractor is towing a tank right now? Are you retarded? Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, it's a huge propaganda campaign.
Absolutely.
I don't even believe anything I hear anymore. From the Ghost of Kiev to the Snake Island, a lot of their propaganda campaigns were completely bullshit. I liked them. I like what they did. It makes sense to me why each side is doing what they're doing.
Right.
Controlling their populations and putting fear into their enemies and things of this nature. But as you sit on the sidelines after doing it for 20 years, you don't have a clue what's real anymore. Like, I don't know.
Well, right.
That could be a simulator with the technology we have, and it might not even be really going on.
Well,
but they're passing it off as,
My thing is like whenever anything starts to pop off, or like when you first start seeing it in the news, really get a really broad look of really what's going on. So if you look at Ukraine as an example, right? We start getting all this, Ukraine, blah, 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 Russia's invading, doing all this stuff. And they use these power words, right? Like invading. Well, if you back it up and look at some of the back pieces of that, is that Putin has been petitioning the UN to go in there and help out the people in Donbass for years. And they haven't. And so whatever the red line in the sand was for Putin, he's already tried all the avenues that he possibly can before he went in to Donbass. And
they don't publicize that.
And they don't publicize that. That's what I'm getting at. So there is a lot of propaganda. But if you look at things like, so I start just grabbing as much stuff before they start trying to hide it. Because once people start asking questions, then shit starts disappearing off the internet. That's where I'm like, this is happening for sure.
Yeah, just
why is that disappearing?
That
was there 2 days ago. Why is it not there now? Right? It's because they're trying to control the narrative. Right? And so you look at things like they were showing the Russians invading, and then they were making jokes about how inferior the Russian troops were and stuff like that. And then I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, hang on a second. I'm not big into what the Russians currently have in their arsenal and stuff like that. But that dude's wearing stuff that I was wearing back in the 90s.
Yeah.
In Canada. Cold War era shit. Leftovers from the Cold War. I know for a fact Russia doesn't wear that shit no more. So where are these pictures really from? Where are these videos really from? Do you see what I'm saying? And then sure as shit, stuff starts disappearing, doing this and doing that. And so there's just so many, whenever I start looking at stuff like that, I always have more questions than I do answers. And then the people that want to shout down your questions, those are the people trying to control the narrative, right? So I've got a question. Why are you shouting at me about a question? Just answer the question. You don't need to emotionally base your argument on that. Just answer the question. If you don't know, you don't know, and we'll figure it out together. Don't tell me that I shouldn't ask that question. You know what I mean? And so that's where I go with that. So again, as an instructor, that's kind of where I go with a lot of that. And I covered down on like terrorist attacks in Mumbai, the Beltway sniper, things like that. And again, we talk about all these power words like sniper, right? Like to me, we were in the military. Sniper means something. Like you were a school trained, right? Gun-toting motherfucker. Like you are a hunter of men. That's what you are. Hunter or gunman, right? You're a hog. And you've gone through some serious training, right? Telling me, like with the DC sniper, most of his shots were within 100 meters. That's basic rifle call shit for anybody in any military.
That's closer.
Why are you calling him a sniper? Was it because he had a black gun with an EOTech on it? Well, that's not even magnified, bro.
It's not a sniper rifle.
That's not you see what I'm saying? So it infuriates me in some regard, but I get, I'm part of the system now, but I want them to think. I want them to
those are power words that are designed to strike fear into their audience. That's why they use them.
Exactly. And if you look at what was that? Juicy Smollett, right? Is what I call him, Juicy Smollett. Old Juicy. You look at that incident, and it's come out that it is absolutely fabricated and shit. But what did they base off of Juicy Smollett? They put in new bills and orders about racism, right? So they've already approved.
Regardless
new
that
bills.
It came out that he
now it's
did or did not have this done to him.
They're not retracting those bills. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, that narrative is there for a reason or by design. And what is that narrative there for? Right? It's to control population through
control thought processes.
Right. Right. So that's where I go with that. But anyway, so that's what I do now. College professor for the most part. Coach lacrosse. That's always fun. We should be going to the state champs this year, I think.
How much purpose do you find coaching?
I love it. So, one of the things, like when I was in the military, I was gone so much, right? Like a lot of us are. And I had a son at home that was, basically, my wife was raising him, and the only interaction he had with dudes was when he was going to these sporting events and getting coached and doing this. And some of them were great, and some of them were not great. And so, when I started transitioning out, as it went to War Battalion, I'm like, you know what? Like, I want to give back. Like, there's so many dudes that aren't here and aren't around. Like, let me
do something
for their kids, right? And so that's kind of how I started out doing it. I mean, obviously it was good for me too, but it gives me a little bit of purpose, right? Like, I want these kids to do well in life. It's not just like, to me, the sport is the vessel. I never played lacrosse, right? Never played it, but that's what I'm coaching now. But I've coached basketball, soccer, golf, and never played soccer. But had 2 undefeated teams. Do you know what I mean? Like, I really like that aspect of it. So, to me, it's all about team, like all the stuff you learn in the military, right? Teamwork and diversity and developing, and like, hey, put what you put into practice, you're going to get out on the game field, right? And so we really do a lot of that stuff, just keeping positive vibes. Like, don't so what if so-and-so missed a pass? Like, don't get down on him. Go over there and let him know you got his back. Things like that. Like, that you see. A lot of it comes from the battlefield, right? Like, you see dudes' wheels falling apart, and you're like, bro, this isn't about me and you getting along anymore. This is about life or death. Like, we need to get the wheel back on your wagon there, because I don't want to have to carry you out of here, right? And I don't want to have to rely on you when I'm faced this way and you're faced that way, and now, what I mean?
You're not all the way home.
And you're not all, so, again, man, there's just so much that goes into that. So trying to get that across to the kids. And then the other thing, right? Like, everything's drama these days. Like, it's just all, and you're looking at the dude, like my first question is, like, when people are freaking out, is like, hang on a sec. Is anybody dead? Yeah. Is anybody missing a limb?
Did it kill you, though?
Yeah. Is anybody missing a limb? No. Then relax. Everything else is just superficial. Like, I get that you want to go with so-and-so and somebody else is dating. You know what? It doesn't matter what it is. Bro, take a couple of deep breaths. We got this. You don't have to worry, but we're not in it, right? And so just take that step back and take a couple breaths and do that. But I really do like coaching.
I think there's a lot that comes, so much importance, learning how to be a team player, learning how to be selfless, maybe for the first time in some of these kids' lives. They're thinking about a team before they're thinking about their own glory or their own position or their own, lot in life. And then, what I love about coaching, I coach both the 8U softball right now and 8U baseball. So I coach Brantley's team and Jane's team. And then Leslie kind of helps out with Kinley's team. And it's like, I find great purpose in it because, I don't always get kids that have the best life. I don't always get that.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, I get these kids that don't have it very good, and I'm able to take, whatever it is, that hour and a half that day, and try to imprint on them, hey, it's okay. It's okay where you come from. Got you. While you're here, you're safe. Right. And we're going to learn these things, and we're going to be a team, and we're going to, practice that. And I get a lot. Like, I get a heart swell from all that. But it's just as equally good and important for those kids, especially, only child, in my opinion. You have an only child, is different than having a child that grew up with siblings, in my opinion, because that's a team already. That little team of siblings that you're learning to follow or you're learning to lead. And then so when I get only children, that's one of my favorite people to coach, is because a lot of it's just brand new to them. Yeah. Like following or leading or anything is just brand new, And so I love that you're doing that and giving back in that way. And like, you're really good at it. Well, maturity wise, and you've coached multiple sports, multiple teams, and you've kind of honed in on how to affect and impact. Well,
I try not to take anything personal either. Like, some of it's professional, obviously, but like little things, like just recalibrating the way parents look at things. Like, I'll never forget, I was coaching a team. I think there were 12U at the time, and it was lacrosse. And we had a little guy, like, it would be like, hey man, everybody needs to go home and practice. Like, if you can't pass and catch, that's basic skills. We've been working on that for however long. Now we got to work on team stuff. Mm-hmm. If you lack in that, you need to go home and work on it. Like, that's homework, bro. Like, you need to do that. And so, I had this kid coming out to practice, and a couple of guys, every time they throw him the ball, he'd just drop it, right? Or he'd go to pass it back to him, and it would be off. Yeah. Well, we ain't gonna win any games. We're not, go home and practice. And so, his mom actually wrote the president of the league, not the league, of my association at the time, and was basically complaining that her son was being bullied at my practices. And I was like, so I get this like email from the president. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and so just the difference in perception, right? Like, you say the word bully, well, of course, that's a huge red flag for me. I'm like, hang on a second. Is somebody getting beat up? Is somebody getting a wedgie? Is somebody getting their food, like their lunch money stolen? Did somebody steal their shoes? Mm-hmm. Are they pushing them around? Is it like physical stuff? And it wasn't that. It was that he had asked, well, I need you to pass me the ball. And they were like, you can't catch the ball. Like, I'm not going to pass to you until you catch a ball. So here you have a 12-year-old boy telling another 12-year-old boy, like, the truth. Like, I'm not passing you the ball because you can't catch it. Like, go home and practice. That's not bullying. That's one kid giving another kid some positive feedback. Like, change the situation, bro. Like, mm-hmm. I'm all about passing you the ball, but you need to be able to catch it first. Mm-hmm. So step one, fix yourself, right? And so, I had to have this conversation with the president, and she was like, she just thought she was going to tell me, like, hey, you need to go ahead and apologize and, address the situation or whatever. So I addressed her, like, hey, you need to change your definition of bullying. Like, that's not bullying at all. Mm-hmm. It's two mm-hmm. kids. That's one kid being honest with another kid. Like, there's no, like, that's what we need in society, not this politically correct. Like, I'm going to
dance around the truth and tell you you're really good. Yeah.
Right. So, I remember having the conversation with the mom, and I don't even think she said anything. She just looked at me like nobody had ever done that or explained mm-hmm. something to her. And I wasn't being an ass about it. I was just being like, hey, this is like, it's the team dynamic. These are dudes, right? I get that you're a woman and a mom and stuff like that, and you want to look out for your kid. I get that. But my job as a coach is to make sure that we have cohesion. And guess what? They're not wrong. Like, they're telling it how they see it. Just because you don't like their perception doesn't mean that you should try to insert yourself and take care of the situation.
And like the next question is like, hey mom, how many minutes or hours are you putting in at home trying to make sure he can catch and facilitate his learning?
Exactly.
Are you because like, not trying to toot my own horn, I learned this from other coaches, watching other coaches through the years. But my very first meeting with my parents of any team, doesn't matter the organization, is, hey, I'm going to give you 100% of me, but I will know who is involved with their kids at home and who is not in one practice. Yeah. Because I give them homework. Hey, this is what little Mary lacked on today. She lacked on her mechanics or she lacked on her form or whatever. And when little Mary comes back, if her parents did the homework and actually spent even 15 minutes a day going over it, I can tell.
Right.
When they come in and they can't catch the lacrosse ball or they can't squeeze their gloves shut just in warming up.
Right.
I know that you're not helping your child.
Right.
And guess what? I can't make your child a superstar. No worries. I can't make your child a superstar in 90 minutes a day, twice a week for 8 weeks. It's never, ever, ever going to happen.
Right.
And so I always highly encourage parents. Now, sometimes they don't have good parents that are going to go home and help them.
Right.
And, I try to help focus on those kids, but at the same time, that kid needs to learn too. Like, if you don't have the help, if this is something that's important to you, you're going to have to make the time and recruit the help from your friends or family or whatever that will help you. And, so it's a little bit of burden back on the family and back on the kid, but it's a necessary one to hear those things.
Yeah, I mean,
like if you tell little Sally that they're awesome their whole life and they're not, then they're going to grow up in this reality that they're awesome, and then they're going to have regular people say, hey, you're not awesome.
Right.
Who told you this? It's like, a perfect analogy would be like the game show or the TV reality series American Idol. Hundreds and thousands of these people line up to go audition for this show.
Because they've been told they're awesome.
Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them then become a laughingstock of the first 6 weeks of the season.
Right.
Because somebody lied to them. Like their entire inner circle lied to them about, they weren't critical in trying to develop them. They lied to them. Like, yes, you should. You should go do that. You'll win. And it's like, that's a telltale. I mean, that's a perfect example of why you shouldn't do that. Because then when they go up there, they have 3 professional vocal judges say, you need to stop. And we need to work on this. And then their entire dreams are shattered. Life is shattered, the whole thing. And it's like, well, if somebody would have told you the truth along the way,
right,
you might have took a couple more years of practice or not done it, whatever.
So, I mean, I think in the beginning it's very important to get the parents involved and stuff like that. But now I'm at the high school level, right?
Yep.
So now, like, you can't always control it. Like, one of the big things is diet, right? Like, you see a lot of in-shape kids, out-of-shape kids, and mostly the out-of-shape kids are coming from out-of-shape parents, because a lot of it's diet. Well, you can't control that, right? You can't control, you don't have a driver's license, you can't drive, if you're late to practice, things like that. So at the high school level, it's a little different because now we can put it right on the kids.
You're old enough to do this now.
Like we're having man-to-man conversations. Like, hey, coach, how do I get more playtime? You want more playtime? I can tell you exactly how. Like, you're slow, dude. You're not the slowest dude on the team. You're not the fastest dude on the team. But you want more playtime? You got to get quicker, right? Or you got to get a left hand. Like, you only got a right hand. Or, hey, your IQ's a little, like, you need to be able to see the whole field. Like, every time you get the ball, if they bum rush you, you don't know what to do with it. And so, but you give them that, and a lot of the kids are really receptive to that. You wouldn't think they are, because it's not a derogatory thing. It's like, hey, you've identified the problem. Like, you asked the question, which is great. That's you taking the first step, right? What's the problem? Now that the problem's identified, I can help you with that, but you got to put in some time and some effort, right? You're not looking to your parents now. This is on you. Like, this is man stuff. Like, you want to be a man? This is how you grow to be a man. Take responsibility for it, grow it, and fix the problem.
You have the answer. It's a matter of action.
Exactly. Now, some of it, obviously, genetics and things like that.
Sure.
Like, maybe you're never going to be that quick, but you can always be quicker. Like, I've never...
Or you can raise your IQ.
As a coach and as an athlete, I've never had a coach tell me you're too athletic. I've never told a kid you're too athletic.
Right.
Hey, you're too fast and you're too strong. Like, we don't need that right now. Like, no, fam. Get in the gym, run. Get your skills up regardless of the sport. Like, you don't hamstring athletes. So get more athletic. If nothing else, get more athletic.
Yeah,
right?
It can hurt nothing.
Hurts nothing. So that's the way I always look at it. But.
Well, man, we've been going for a while. I appreciate the time that you come out, and I'm sure we'll do this again, man.
Yeah.
But no, we got a hard out coming up. But I appreciate it. Matt, you got anything? Parting shots?
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enjoyed it.
It was
Much
fun.
appreciated.
Well, I appreciate it.
And me and you will get together afterwards and figure something out.
Yeah, sounds good.
Some fishing or something. So, cool. I appreciate you coming out, man. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, guys, if you take anything away from this episode, anything away from any of the content that comes out on the page, please just share it out. Don't be selfish with the information. And we'll see you next time. Choices, not chances. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking the building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good. That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.